Councilor Antosky, you are now live.
Thank you very much, and welcome to the meeting of the Committee of the Whole Community Development, everyone, which I now call to order. I'd ask that you rise as you are able for the reading of the invocation. As we come together today, we recognize the great responsibilities laid upon us. Our council will always strive to understand the needs of the people we serve and to use power wisely and well. Our council will always strive to understand the needs of the people we serve and to use power wisely well. Our purpose is to establish and maintain a city of prosperity and righteousness where freedom prevails and where justice rules. Let us also not forget those who served our community and who are no longer with us so that we can continue to do the work we must in their memory. Please be seated. This evening, our clerk is Julia Sipple, who is supported by Jennifer Page. And Julia, would you please call the roll?
Thank you, Councilor Utley. Councilor Utley?
Yes.
Present?
I'm sorry, I'm here. Yes, sorry.
Thank you. Councilor Weaver?
Present.
Councilor Martin?
Here.
Councilor Sless?
Present.
Councilor McCreary?
Here.
Councilor Wall?
Present.
Councilor Vanderstelt?
Present.
Mayor Davis?
Present.
Councilor Carpenter?
Here.
Councilor Van Tilburg?
Present.
And Chair Councilor Antosky.
I'm here. Thanks, everyone. I'd just like to remind the committee and our viewing public of a few procedural rules for virtual meetings in operating as efficiently as possible. All members will be muted for the meeting to reduce feedback. All web cameras for committee members shall be turned on. Staff will be requested to join the video meeting should the need to answer questions of members of committee arise. Any member of committee should indicate they wish to speak by pressing the raise hand button on the participant list screen. And the clerk staff will lower your hand once you've been recognized by me for your speaking opportunity. In the event a connection service interruption occurs that affects quorum of the Committee of the Whole, we may recess the meeting for up to 15 minutes to regain quorum. If quorum is not achieved, the meeting will be adjourned. All members of committee participating via online video conference will vote using eScribe, and the clerk will announce the vote results. Members of the public who registered as delegates or under the statutory public hearings are able to take part electronically via webcam or via the telephone for the meetings. All rules for delegations under the city's procedural bylaw continue to apply. We're now at declarations of conflict of interest. I understand that Councilors McCreary and Vanderstelt both have conflict of interest on item 5.1, 180 Grand River. If you could please state the nature of your conflict, please. Councilor McCreary.
Madam Chair, thank you. I own property in the immediate vicinity of that building.
Thank you. And Councilor Vanderstelt.
Thank you, Chair Antosky. The same goes for Linda and myself.
All right. Thank you. At this time, I'll ask members of the committee what items they'd like to separate for discussion purposes. Please note that item 7.1.6, item 1, which is Mohawk Lake Real Estate Strategy, and item 2, which is Mohawk Lake Mandate, will be automatically separated due to delegations and an amendment. Are there any further items contained within the items for consideration consent that committee members wish to separate for discussion purposes? Councilor Van Tilburg.
7.1.1.
Thank you. Any others? All right. Seeing none, Councilor Wall, I believe you have the motion to approve all items for consideration consent not separated for discussion purposes.
Yep, moved by myself, seeking a seconder. Councilor Martin, thank you. Separation of items for consideration and consent, items for discussion purposes, that all items for consideration consent 7.1 and 7.2 not separated for discussion be approved.
All right, I will call the vote on items not separated for discussion purposes. Clerk, would you please read the titles of the items that are subject to this vote and then proceed with the vote?
Thank you. All items Applicable to this vote, 712 Heritage Register Project Owner Consultation Program for Listing Group B Properties Procurement of Consulting Services, 713 Part Lot Control Relief Application PLCO 121 for 1 to 23 Amos Avenue odd numbers, Part Lot Control Relief Application PLCO 221 for 402 to 434 Blackburn Drive even numbers, 715 relocation of the Provincial Offenses Court Services Memorandum of Understanding, 7.1.6 item 3 only being the billboard cost associated with Mohawk Lake District Working Group Report 2021 412, item 721 2020 year-end report on building permit fees, and all minutes listed.
Thank you. We'll call the vote.
All items not separated for discussion purposes are carried unanimously on a recorded vote. Those in favor, Mayor Davis, Councilors Vanderstelts, Last Martin, Antosky, Wall, Van Tilburg, Carpenter, McCreary, Utley, and Weaver.
Thank you. Committee will now move into the statutory public hearing, which will be chaired by Mayor Davis. Mayor?
Thank you very much, Chair Antosky. So good evening, everyone. We have only one statutory public hearing on our agenda this evening, and it is a public meeting held in accordance with the provisions of the Planning Act. The purpose of the meeting is to discuss the planning application and to hear from the public either in support of or in opposition to the application. At the end of the public meeting, the committee will pass a recommendation which is generally considered by the council at the following scheduled meeting of City Council. So the name of anyone who speaks in regards to an item tonight will appear within the meeting minutes. Anyone wishing notice of any further proceedings in this matter should also provide their name and address to the clerk's office. The procedure we follow is that the applicant speaks first, responds to questions, followed by municipal staff, and then of course the public. The applicant will then have an opportunity at the end of that to provide clarification to any questions or issues that are raised following the applicant's initial submission. So we'll now consider the first item, which is an application for zoning bylaw amendment. It's PZ-11-20 and draft plan of condominium 29 CD 20503 in respect to a property municipally described as 180 Grand River Avenue. So I'm now going to ask the applicant to please appear before the committee. And if you please state your name and present your application. I believe we have Matt Johnson on behalf of Urban Solutions Planning and Land Development here, I believe, representing the owner of the property, King and Benton. There's Mr. Johnson there.
Good evening, members of committee. My name is Matt Johnson, a registered professional planner with Urban Solutions, and I'm here joined by Ava Barnett, also of our team at Urban Solutions. And we're privileged to be here on behalf of Mr. Steve Charest and King and Benton Group. Members of the committee may recall our agenda item being heard back on March 9th. And since that time, as you'll recall, the decision was made to table this application to a future agenda. And it is one application, part of a broader comprehensive development where the second half, what we'll call the east half of the development, is scheduled to come back on May 11th. So again, tonight we're dealing with just the western half here, and the eastern half will come back on May 11th. The reason for the deferral was really to provide an opportunity to recap on the level of engagement that has taken place over the file, and to summarize how we've responded to that engagement and the feedback that we've received. So at this point, I'll turn over to Ava, who's here with me, and she'll walk you through a detailed presentation, and then we'll be happy to respond to any questions and provide further comments. Thanks.
Hello, everyone. As my colleague has mentioned, my name is Ava Barnett, and I'll be walking you through a short presentation regarding this development proposal. Next slide, please. So staff will be explaining further, but we are seeking a zoning bylaw amendment on behalf of the property owner to develop lands south of Grand River Avenue in the Homedale neighborhood with the 4-story apartment building. Next slide, please. For those who participated in the neighborhood information meeting in September, you'll recall that we presented development proposals for lands on either side of Jubilee Avenue with 2 4-story apartment buildings. As Matt noted, however, tonight we are addressing the western site at this meeting, and the eastern site will be addressed at the committee of the whole meeting scheduled for May. Next slide, please. So the western site is approximately ½ an acre, and current uses of the lands include commercial, residential, and vacant. Bisecting the site is the former Lake Erie and Northern Railway. Next slide, please. The subject lands are designated mixed commercial residential in the Brantford official plan. They are additionally within Special Policy Area 1, which includes all areas of the floodplain land within the city that are largely developed and protected by dikes. Next slide, please. The subject lands are also in the mixed commercial residential exception 2 zone in Brantford's zoning bylaw, which does permit the proposed development. Next slide, please. This proposal entails a 4-story apartment building with 30 residential dwelling units, 33 parking spaces, and 20 spots for bicycle parking. Next slide, please. The landscape plans detail proposed plantings and amenity space. Next slide, please. This slide depicts an artist's rendering of the proposed development viewed from Grand River Avenue looking south towards the river. The western site is on the right of this image and the eastern site is on the left. Next slide, please. This conceptual rendering offers different views of the proposed development, noting the proximity to the existing trail to the south and beyond that, the Grand River. The planning applications were received by the city and numerous supporting plans and studies were submitted for review, including site plans, building elevations, civil engineering reports and plans, landscape plans, traffic and parking studies, and an urban design brief. Next slide, please. In terms of chronology, the formal consultation application was submitted to the city in March of 2018. A zoning bylaw amendment application was submitted in May of 2020. And a public information meeting was held just this past September. Next slide, please. The public was engaged and consulted with extensively throughout this project. The level of engagement has led to a development proposal which is reflective of this community collaboration and has resulted in a design that incorporates local interests and neighborhood input. Next slide, please. Public comments were received and revised plans and studies were submitted to the City of Brantford to address concerns voiced by neighborhood residents. Both parking and transportation impact studies were undertaken, and they lend support to the proposal and have been accepted by staff. Additionally, privacy concerns regarding the balconies were addressed through a reduction in the number of balconies proposed and a modification to the overall location. Next slide, please. Thank you, and I'm going to hand it back to my colleague for more comments.
Thank you, Ava. So as we can see, the level of engagement was quite significant and robust. The slides that you saw there really documented the frequency of engagement and how those meetings were conducted. And in the end, that engagement resulted in a better plan, a plan that was actually amended between the March 9th agenda and tonight's meeting, where notable changes were included, again, in direct response to that feedback. So I think in the end, the process has again resulted in a better plan, a plan that meets provincial policy direction, a plan that further implements the city's official plan, and conforms with the zoning bylaw, subject to the regulations that are included, really site-specific modifications that reflect the irregular shaped parcel of the lands and accommodate the proposal as put forward. So with that, we are in support of the staff report and the bylaws as drafted, and we ask committee and council for their approval, and we're happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. We do have Councilor Utley. If you'd like to ask a question.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, through you to Matt. Matt, have you removed all the balconies on the one side of the development?
That's correct. And that
Okay, and that
has been prescribed and built right into the zoning bylaw to provide a level of control to that effect.
okay, I am pleased to hear that. I think that was a major concern for one of the neighbors who lived directly behind those balconies. So, so thank you.
Councilor Sluss.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Hi, Matt. The balconies that were removed that Councilor Utley was talking about, those are the ones that face Grand River Avenue that were peering down on the homes across the street on would be Chestnut.
As a point of clarification, the balconies were removed on the west elevation that overlooked Chestnut. Those are the balconies that have been removed.
Right. Yeah, I was trying to confirm that's where the concerns had been raised to myself, and I think Councilor Utley as well. Okay, appreciate that. I would say that's a win for the neighborhood because it was a concern and they were raising it. And I understand that you actually went to those houses and spoke to those people to get their concerns, and you dealt with them. Is that correct?
That's correct. And I think that we really need to tip our hat to King and Benton and Mr. Charest for his level of engagement and for his ear to listen to those concerns. They, you know, it's one thing to hear the concern, but it's another to actually listen and respond. And that's what we've really tried to do in this instance.
Appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
I don't see any other questions, but Matt, I've got a couple of questions. So when I read the comments that we saw before, and I think that we're going to hear from this evening, I think it all comes down to, I guess, a question of intensification of the parking. And typically, I believe our bylaw is 1 to 1.5, and this is what, 1 to 1.1, 30 units, 33 spaces. Am I correct on that?
Correct, yes.
All right. And, you know, normally it would be around 45, would it not?
Correct.
All right. And if you were maintaining, if you had 33 parking spots, you maintain 1 to 1.5, how many units would you be allowed?
You know, I went to school for planning because I'm poor at math. So if you don't mind, I'm looking down briefly at my my calculator here. So at 33 spaces, that would bring us down to 22 units.
Okay. And why do you think 1 to 1.1? That's pretty thin for parking. How's that going to work and not create a parking problem for the neighborhood?
Appreciate the good question. And for a brief recap, we did include a professional engineer who completed a traffic and a parking study. That study was submitted and reviewed by staff, and they accepted the conclusions and support the amendment. So that's one short component of what's at play here. But what's also important is there's the condominium element that's before you today, this evening as well. And that condominium element brings a third or an additional level of control where I like to think of it, or I describe it as a process that's somewhat self-regulating. The intended tenants of and owners of these units understand what they're getting to when they purchase their condominium. It'll be right there in the declaration. It'll have that verbiage in there, so they really understand what they're getting and what they're buying into. So the idea or the concern of two vehicle owners can really be put to rest and addressed by that very fact that they know full well when they're purchasing that it's only coming with one and that there's no opportunity for an additional spot. So that in of itself will only attract buyers who that lifestyle appeals to. Then from a visitor perspective, we were able to really do the detailed review to demonstrate that the real demand anticipated for visitor parking can be satisfied by those 3 units, and that it won't have an adverse impact on the immediate surrounding area. So I think it's that self-regulating component that the condominium application brings that can put some of that concern to rest, that it is indeed self-regulating, because the buyers will be fully aware of what comes with their units.
And I'm sorry, I think I missed this, but are these 1-bedroom units, some 1, some 2? What's the configuration?
The configuration, you know, I don't have that answer at my fingertips, but if I could find myself a short amount of time, I could certainly provide a little more certainty to that one.
Yeah, you got a response, a reply, so you can certainly. I don't want to give you an answer unless you know it's correct. So it will come up again. So, but I have Councilor Martin. Councilor Martin would like to ask you a couple of questions.
Thank you. Will the parking spots be assigned to the units?
They will.
Okay. And is there an opportunity for people to buy an extra spot, or is it strictly 1 spot per unit?
Strictly 1 spot per unit.
Okay, thank you.
Well, Matt, I'm not seeing any other questions, but we'll come back to you after we've heard from our staff and the public, and perhaps you can answer my question then. And any other questions that might come up. So let's move on then. We now ask, please, municipal staff, you please speak to this application. I believe we have Jeff Medeiros, Joe Muto, and Nicole Wilmot. I believe one of the 3 of you will be speaking to this.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of committee. I'm Jeff Medeiros. I'm an intermediate planner with the development planning section of the city. And I'm here before you this evening to provide staff's analysis and review of the zoning bylaw amendment and draft plan condominium applications for 180 Grand River Avenue. Next slide. As I said, it's rezoning draft plan condo, proposing a 4-story apartment building with 30 units. Before I dive into the application itself in terms of what's being proposed and what has transpired to date, just high-level overview of the neighborhood, just to add on really to the presentation that the applicant had just prescribed or completed. So the site is located in the Homedale neighborhood. It is vacant, so the airflow you see on the screen is a little dated. That old mechanic shop or auto service shop has since been removed from the site. You can actually see from the photos that were taken back in January, unfortunately with the snow on the ground. And the site is vacant. Used to be used, or at least a portion of it, had the former Lake Erie and Northern Railway, and you can see it from the air photo, bisected from the southeast and would traverse to the northwest. The lot is irregular shape in the sense that it fronts 3 public streets and really abuts 2 residential properties to the south, one immediately and then a house on a larger property on at the end of Chestnut Avenue. The neighborhood is a bit diverse in the sense of its composition of different housing types, singles, multi-units, duplexes. There's actually an apartment building being constructed down the street right now. There's a townhouse block you can see on Jubilee Avenue, and there's even some small scale commercial uses on the south side of Grand River Avenue. So very much what I would maybe refer to as a mixed use corridor of some sort with respect to the residential and some small scale commercial uses. Next slide, please. So the plan that you can see on the screen here is actually the old previous site plan, and I'll speak to what has changed. I know the applicant has just did that as well. Like I said, 4-story apartment building, 30 units, 33 parking spaces. This site's in a flood zone. So what that basically means is that there's no underground parking. So all the parking is at grade. So majority of parking is underneath the building itself with a surface parking area located as well. Both accesses to the site are from Jubilee Avenue. So there won't be any vehicle accesses proposed at this time to Chestnut or Grand River. And just one thing to note too, there is an active site plan application where staff are currently going through the detailed design review of the proposal. Next slide, please. So as I said before, it's a draft plan of condominium. It's a standard condominium, which is pretty typical for apartment buildings. In this particular case, units would be available for sale as well as parking spaces, and they'd be for sale for future purchasers. So just kind of wanted to capture those two elements as part of the plan of condo. Next slide, please. So with respect to policy, provincial policy official plan, proposals consistent with the growth plan, PPS, and the city's waterfront master plan. The site is currently designated mixed commercial residential area. And that's in the current official plan. The one that's still, or recently was adopted by council is still subject to provincial approval. Under what I'm gonna call the current official plan, apartment buildings are permitted use. I just want to acknowledge that. So there wasn't a need for an official plan amendment in this particular case. Next slide, please. So the zoning on the property is mixed commercial residential with an exception 2 zone. And as I said, the F prefix in front of the C3 just gives a notation that it's in the flood zone. You can actually see from the zoning schedule that a number of properties in this area fall within that category. In terms of the zoning, so the zoning, the use is permitted. So apartment buildings are permitted use in the C3 zone. What's being proposed is some site-specific provisions, and that is specific to the proposal itself, which I'll go into a bit more detail in the next slide. So in terms of the amendments, this slide here just highlights where a number of the amendments are being requested: front yard, exterior side yards, rear yards, front yards, sorry, balcony encroachments, and there's also some site-specific provisions for lot area, lot coverage, landscape open space, parking, and loading. I'm not going to go into the specifics of all these. Staff's analysis can be found in the staff report. One item that I just do want to acknowledge is that some of these items really are a result of some of the requests from the city for conveyances, specifically road windings. So the road winding element, and that's discussed in staff's report, impacts the frontages along Chestnut, Grand River, and Jubilee. So some of the provisions that are being requested are a result, to some degree, as a result of those road winding conveyances. And the applicant has already accommodated those road windings into this design. So the proposal you see on the screen does include those future conveyances. Next slide, please. In terms of some, what I'm going to call site-specific provisions that have been requested by staff, one being planting strip and privacy fencing. It's something that planning staff have requested recently in a number of proposals. And really what it's intended to do is to provide that sort of transition and buffer between neighboring properties. So in this particular case, privacy fence, 2.2 meters is the highest fence that's allowed under the city's fence bylaw. It's used as a means to mitigate impacts from privacy, but also to, like I said, it's to provide a transition and a buffer between neighboring properties. So in this particular case, the 2 abutting residential properties to the south. Planting strips, same thing. It's to essentially provide enhanced landscaping. And planting strips are being proposed along all public frontages, as well as the rear of the property. Next slide, please. In terms of public input, a common comment that came up was the building height as well as its relationship to privacy, and then parking and traffic. So from the building height perspective and privacy, the building height, I do just want to acknowledge it does comply with the bylaw. So 4 stories is permitted, and the city's chief building official has made the determination that this is in fact a 4-story apartment building. So there wasn't any, or there isn't any request to the zoning provisions with respect to amending the height of the building. That is permitted. From a privacy standpoint, some of staff's recommendations, specifically things such as bringing the building closer to the public street, in this particular case, Grand River Avenue, what that does is it does mitigate some potential impacts with respect to privacy at the back of the properties. And there are some comments about balconies. I'll talk about that in the next slide. I just want to acknowledge that the bylaw does allow balconies. There's nothing that prohibits balconies, but I'll explain that in a bit more detail in the next slide. As it relates to parking and traffic, so as the applicant or an agent has indicated, a parking study and a traffic study was completed for this development proposal. Staff and Public Works had indicated that they did not have any concerns with respect to that study. And with respect to parking, so the applicant is proposing a reduction in parking of 1.1 spaces. From staff's perspective, this is a site that is in an urban area. It's very walkable. It's got great access to transit. In fact, there's transit stops right along Grand River in front of the building. It's also close to multi-use trails. So there's the trail along the Grand River, and then obviously any of the public streets and sidewalks. And it's also close to downtown. So this is very much what I'm going to call a walkable neighborhood. And so staff's analysis is part and parcel of that, and staff's recommendations is a correlation as it relates to the application itself, in terms of the context and what are the current traffic volumes in the area. Another item that I just wanted to bring up too, as it relates to parking, is a recommendation of the traffic study was the inclusion of transit passes in future condominium owners. And so staff have agreed to that concept. In fact, there's actually examples in other municipalities. I believe Ottawa is one that we were looking at recently, where they've included that sort of recommendations in different forms of planning analysis and approvals. In this particular case, planning staff are recommending that those transit passes be a condition of the condominium. So what that basically means is that before they can register the condominium and actually sell the units and convey them legally, they need to satisfy the condominium conditions, and that would be one of them. So there would have to be evidence that that condition has been addressed. Most likely would be carried forward in an agreement, as well as a legal undertaking from the applicant. So from that perspective, staff are supporting or have recommended support for the parking reduction for this particular development. Next slide, please. So as I said before, and as the applicant has indicated, there has been a change to the plan since it was originally, or since this application was supposed to come to the committee last month. And that particular change deals with the balconies that are fronting Chestnut Avenue. So you can see on the screen here, this is the newest plan. This is the one that the applicant had just illustrated. There are no balcony encroachments. Staff are in support of this, and how this will be implemented is through the zoning. So the zoning bylaw will strictly prohibit balcony encroachments along this frontage or along this facade. So there won't be any balcony encroachments. In replace of them, though, the applicant is proposing Juliet balconies. For those that don't know, those are really treated as windows. They're essentially a sliding door with no outdoor living space. They're quite common, obviously, in parts of Europe, and we do see them in some developments here in an Ontario context as well. And so this particular item here is really a direct result of the applicant and developer working with a neighborhood concern, and now we're implementing it through zoning, and staff are in agreement of this particular change. Next slide, please. So in terms of development considerations, So staff are recommending approval of these applications as noted in the staff report and are recommending a holding provision. The holding provision is tied back to the site plan process with respect to an agreement securities. They'll need that even before they can get building permits, and a record of site condition, which is a approval through the province with respect to the condition of the property, partly because there was an old rail corner, so it needs to be brought to a residential standard. Similarly, as I said, active site plan application, that is really the detailed design review that staff are currently reviewing as part of the applications pending the result of this application. And similarly, staff are recommending a number of draft plan of condominium conditions, which you could see in the back of the staff report as well. Next slide, please. So as in conclusion, staff are recommending approval of the rezoning and condominium applications consistent with the PPS and conforms to the growth plan. As I said, it is a brownfield site, and in staff's professional opinion, it is an appropriate proposal and development for the subject lands. Thank you, and I'd be happy to answer any questions or comments of the committee. Thanks.
Thank you, Matt. Councilor Sluss.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think you addressed my question, Jeff, but I just wanted to verify. And I must say, you don't look that tired for a new dad. You must be getting sleep somehow. But any event, it was indicated that you had that staff had reviewed and approved the parking plan, the reduction in parking. Can you explain that a little further? Why you approved it?
Okay, so just to clarify, and through Mr. Mayor to Councillor Sluss, there was a report that was submitted, and staff and Public Works basically said they don't have any concerns with it. So they're based on what's being proposed in terms of traffic volumes and the on-street parking supply, as well as what was being proposed as part of mitigation measures to support the reduction. Staff were in agreement that request for 1.1 spaces per unit was acceptable. And as part of that, as I said, planning staff are recommending, for example, the transit passes as a condo condition. That is really a direct result of that study.
Okay, and just secondly, on the balconies, they've been removed on the side that faces Grand River Avenue, correct?
Chestnut.
Well, but the building runs along Grand River Avenue, so it faces Chestnut, but it's on Grand River Avenue. So the balconies that face Grand River Avenue and Chestnut, they've all been removed?
Through the mayor, no. So just the balconies, I think there's 12 in total that were removed from the facade facing Chestnut Avenue. The balconies that are still being shown fronting Grand River Avenue are still in place.
Okay, so it's a portion. So 12 out of the 30 have been removed.
Correct.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Next, Councilor Weaver.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Well, Jeff, and congratulations. I know we're talking about this specific property, but do we have any information about the other building that's going to be across the way? And I'm specifically looking at what their parking availability is going to be. Do we know those numbers?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, we do. So that particular development is coming back before the committee on May, Committee of the Whole. They're proposing 45 units in that proposal, and they have 52 spaces. So
they're deficient there as well.
They are deficient as well. I believe it's about almost 1.2 spaces per unit, approximately.
Okay, and Jeff, are you familiar with that area at all? Have you driven by the area?
I am.
So do you know that right beside where this build is potentially going to be occurring?
Yes.
There used to be an aquatic pet store.
Correct.
And that pet store parking lot used to be where this location is. And my concern is now that pet store, I believe, is going to be turned into a restaurant or a brewery or something from the looks of it, from the last time I drove by. Where are those folks going to park now? So what we're doing is we have a deficiency in parking here. We'll have a deficiency in the other new building. And now we have a commercial restaurant that has no parking and no street parking on Grand River Ave. Is that correct?
So through you, Mr. Mayor, I mean, that's a good question. that particular site, I believe, would be considered non-conforming in the sense that it actually doesn't have any legal parking spaces. And in fact, it's actually owned by the same owner of this particular proposal that's here this evening. So I mean, even though that parking area may have been used as parking, I don't think it would be dedicated for parking for that site. So to answer your question, if there is a restaurant established there, then most likely individuals would be using the street for parking, because that particular proposal will have established parking just for the condominium and doesn't incorporate any parking for the commercial use that's there.
So I am concerned about the parking, and I don't think if we don't take care of that now, it'll be the councilor's problem in the future. And then just my last question, do we have any assurances in the bylaws that we're going to be creating for this build on their timeframes to complete the build?
Through Mr. Mayor, there wouldn't be any stipulations in the zoning bylaw regarding to that time frame. It's sort of dependent on when they get site plan approval, and then from there, it's up to them as to when they want to proceed with obtaining a building permit. But perhaps the applicant can maybe answer that a bit better in terms of what their timelines are for construction.
Because I'm also concerned that we'll have 2 empty lots that are fenced with wood, with dirt, very similar to what's occurred in West Brant with the Stelco build, which is the same developer. It's been sitting for about 6 or 7 years now. So I would also be concerned that the length of time that it's going to sit without it being completed. But we don't have any reassurances. There's nothing we can add to give them like a 5-year window or something, just so the community is not in a constant level of construction.
Well, I mean, for example, one thing that just to maybe add, condominium actually has a lapsing period. So they have a condominium before committee this evening. The requirements under the Planning Act is that they would expire within 3 years. So, and that's basically for them to register the condominium within 3 years. And for standard condos and something like this, they normally need the building built before they can actually finish their condominium, or at least built to a point that, you know, they have interior walls up, because the condominium will establish, you know, what the condo owns and what future owners will own. So I think there's some reassurances in that process that if in the event that they don't proceed, their condominium will lapse. Unfortunately, I don't think there's anything in zoning that would prohibit a time frame that, you know, to ensure that the development proceeds within, let's say, 5 years. Zoning doesn't normally do that.
Okay, thank you for that, Jeff.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Next, Councilor Utley.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to staff. Jeff, congratulations. Is there an allowance for mobility scooters in the floor plan, or would those mobility scooters have to go up to the room, the place where the individual lives?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, that's a very good question. There doesn't appear to be anything that I would say at grade in terms of a storage area that that would, you know, allow for the storage of mobility or assisted devices. Most likely, I mean, especially with the cost of some of those devices, I would think that most individuals would, you know, take the elevator up and bring those devices directly to the room where they would probably need them. There is bicycle parking, but unfortunately, I don't believe there's specific to that.
Okay, thank you, Jeff.
Councilor Martin.
Thank you. Jeff, how much on-street parking is there in the immediate neighborhood?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I don't have that number.
Okay.
I do know that, and I think one of the councilors maybe have alluded to it already, Councilor Weaver, I believe that there are restrictions for parking on Grand River Avenue, but you know, there is on-street parking available on Chestnut Avenue, Jubilee, and then as you go on Chestnut Avenue on the north of Grand River, there's on-street parking as well. But unfortunately, I don't have a hard number as to what is actually available within the vicinity of that site.
Okay, and you mentioned that if they don't build within 3 years, their condo thing will lapse. Is there a fee to restarting that?
So what would happen, so to answer your question, yes, there would be a fee, and then the request would have to be made. And committee would actually have to authorize an extension to a condominium, similar to what this committee has done for other condos in the city. So, I mean, if in the event that the application is getting close to lapsing, there may be a request coming before this committee regarding an extension if required.
Okay, does that extension come with a fee?
Correct. Yes.
And do you know how much that would be?
I'd have to check our fee schedule. I believe we just introduced that fee. We didn't have one actually in the past.
Okay, and do you know what the fee is for the application in the first place?
The rezoning would have been around the 10,000 mark. The condo, definitely a lot more than that. I think it was about 15 to 20,000.
Okay. Yeah, that's my questions. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Councilor Carpenter.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Jeff, I already congratulate you at our other meetings. The condition 4, the owner shall provide to the satisfaction of the Director of Planning a letter of undertaking agreeing to complete a reserve fund study in accordance with the Condominium Act. Really happy to see this. When we say the owner, we mean the developer, right?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, that's correct. And Councilor Carpenter, you may recall that actually is a newer condition that we had recently reworded. How it was worded previously is that it was supposed to be completed, but those studies are to be actually approved by the condo board. So in this situation, staff recommend that we get a letter of undertaking for them agreeing to do that study as required under the Act.
And whatever the reserve fund study shows needs to be put in the reserve fund. The
correct
developer, the owner at that time, will do that.
Correct.
Put that money. Now, this will also include that part of the reserve fund study will be the age of the aging infrastructure that may be being reused underneath the property, as I understand it.
Yes, it would be for any sort of works that would normally be required to be fixed, within a certain time frame, whether it be private services on the property, repaving the parking areas, things like that, even just basic interior maintenance. That's what reserves are intended for.
And we're using some existing infrastructure. That's what I was getting at. So that existing infrastructure is aged, got some age on it, and that information would be part of that reserve fund study, correct?
I believe so, correct.
Okay, I just want to make sure that. And the bus passes, it says something, how long do they got to give the bus passes until the turnover of a condominium?
That's a very good question. I mean, staff are recommending that condition, there's not a particular time frame tied to it. So the intent is that there would be a requirement for the developer to provide it. So from planning staff's perspective, that would stay with the property in perpetuity, meaning that if, for example, if you owned a condo unit and sold, there would be a requirement to have that pass go forward with a future owner of the unit.
Yes, but that pass is being filled now. The future owner of the unit will be a condominium corporation, no longer the developer. Then who pays for that pass? Condominium corporation?
It would be the condominium corporation that would be responsible for that.
So the condominium corporation, out of their condo fees, are paying for monthly passes, and they do that whether they get used or not.
Correct. I believe that's the intent of that condition.
Okay, I think that needs a little more work. They haven't decided on where garbage collection is going to be yet. We don't have a site location where a garbage bin may be.
I don't have the plan in front of us on the screen right now, but there is actually a site located in the parking lot near the southerly access. I do just want to reiterate that staff are still reviewing that. Okay. We recognize there's some constraints with that property, but that will be part and parcel of a site plan application.
Okay, all right. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you.
Councilor Weaver.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councilor Carpenter actually triggered a question. So with the transit, so if we're going to be doing this, I'm actually for it. I think it's a great idea. My only concern is our gas tax is calculated by how many people have a transit pass and heads on the bus. So we're not, going astray of the calculation process for the gas tax by doing this, are we?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I don't have an answer to that, unfortunately. I don't think so. Perhaps we can maybe take that question back, Councilor Weaver, and get an answer for you on that one, because I don't have the answer, unfortunately.
Yeah, I mean, I would hope it wouldn't be a problem, but the government may take issue with us having numbers with people that have maybe no intentions of using a bus pass. So.
See, Mr. Hutchings popped up. Mr. Hutchings, you want to comment on that?
Oh, you're muted.
Yes, I can through you, Mr. Mayor. I was going to say it's you just heard my answer, Councilor Weaver. I was going to say we would have increased numbers because people would have to have transit passes, but if they're so that our passes that's what they count them as, how many passes we sell. But amount of heads in the actual buses is not what they count. They count on how many we sell. So so that might help our gas tax versus hurt it. So it might be a benefit.
Yes, and I suspect it would be, but my concern is the federal government might take issue with us counting those numbers towards our gas tax allocation.
Yes, I would agree with you, Councilor. Yes, we'll have to look at it a little further, but we'll follow up on that.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Jeff, I think that's all the questions. Thanks again. Thanks very much for coming in.
Thank you.
Presenting so thoroughly and competently on this application. So now's the opportunity for members of the public to provide their comment. And we have 4 individuals who've registered tonight to speak to us. And so I'll call up the first of those, who I believe is Kevin Barb. So Mr. Barb, if you could come forward, please. Staff will bring you forward. But so if you can just please state your full name and your address for the record, and then you can provide your comments, and then members of council will follow up, I'm sure, with some questions for you.
Hi, can you hear me?
We can.
Hi, my name's Kevin Barb, and I live at 149 Chestnut Avenue. First of all, I'd like to thank Councilor Utley and Councilor Sless that I spoke to on the phone a couple of times about my issues. My major issue was the balconies facing directly, the balconies that are in front of my place facing directly into my yard. My yard's on the side, it's not in the back. So the balconies were basically stadium side, like looking directly into my side yard at about 43 feet away. Because the last meeting was postponed, I was able to have a meeting with Steve Charest of King and Benton. And I spoke with him for about an hour, and he agreed to remove the balconies along Chestnut Avenue. And just to clarify Councilor Utley's question, this building is in an L shape. It goes along Grand River Avenue, then it goes in an L down Chestnut. So the balconies along Grand River will still be there, because across the street, the houses are much, much further away than the 2 houses along Chestnut. So there's 12 balconies directly in front of my place, and Steve Charest agreed to remove the balconies. And so I'd like to thank him and Councilor Utley and Councilor Sless for speaking to me on the phone a couple of times and addressing my concern. And I'm glad the last meeting was postponed, because I don't think this would have happened if it wasn't. So I'd like to thank you both, and Steve Charest of King and Ben for agreeing to remove the balconies. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Barb. I don't see any questions from council members, but once again, Councilor Well.
Sorry. Thank you for coming to this council and speaking and sharing your thoughts. Community engagement is incredibly important, and it takes a lot of courage to sign up and come out and speak, and thank you very much.
Not seeing any other questions. Again, thank you very much, Mr. Barb, for coming out tonight. And
thank you.
Hang on, we'll be dealing with this in pretty short order. Next, I believe, is Fred Beal. Oh, Mrs. Beal, but I assume Mr. is probably off in your shoulder behind you there. So if you could just state your full name, please, your address for the record. And I can also tell you that we did receive and was distributed by the clerk's office your written submission. So we have that as well.
I'm Christine Beal. My husband is Fred Beal, and he's kind of in and out unloading wood right now for our shop that we're finishing. But we wanted to attend this meeting, even though we're located at 152 Grand River Avenue. So we're on the corner of Yorkshire and Grand River Ave. So although this doesn't directly affect us right behind our property like the other building will, we still want to be up in touch on what's going on in our community, in our neighborhood. So we had, and you know what, I'm so happy for Kevin, and I have to thank Steve too for doing that with the balconies. That's fantastic, because I can understand Kevin's concern with the privacy. So kudos to you guys who all work together with that. That's great. The one big thing that we have a concern with, especially with the other building on Jubilee as well, Grand River Ave, is of course the traffic. Being in a Homedale and not a lot of parking on the street. But we have been addressing this as we go along. But the one concern I have too is now I know that there's going to be bikes, and I know there's going to be motorized bikes and that type of stuff. So that's going to create even more traffic that way. And I'm curious about the dike behind us, which has now become more of a motorized walkway instead of a walkway. But that can be handled in the future if anything needs to be addressed there. The other concern we had was the Molochs, which is what they're called for the garbage containers. They're called Molochs. That residence, that condominium building at Grand River will have their own, correct? They're not going to be sharing them. That's one of our concerns. And if anything else, I just want to know, did each councillor and Mr. Mayor Davis, did you guys actually come down and look at the area physically yourself, just to get a good eye view of what was happening? And the stop signs on Grand River Ave, I'm wondering, because there is going to be increased traffic, of course, with new residents. And I know there's going to be at least one car per unit. Is there any idea, like plans in the future of creating more stop signs or something to reduce the traffic on Grand River Ave? Because I can show you videos that they're not using the stop signs now, but I'm wondering if something's going to be done to kind of slow down the traffic a little bit on Grand River Ave. That was just my comment.
Great. So we do have some councillors that would like to ask you some questions. They may make some comments. So first of all, one of your ward councillors, Councillor Celeste.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you for coming out, Christine. We appreciate hearing what the community has to say. Actually, I was down at the site on Sunday. I had a call. I don't know whether you heard about it. I had a call from one of your neighbors. They had an encampment behind their house on King and Benton's property. And I got a hold of Mr. Charest, and we went down and we had we got it out of there. So have we seen it? Yes, I've seen it. The stop signs, I'm not convinced that that's the answer. We continually, Councilor Otley and myself have been working with our traffic department for mitigating factors as far as speed on Grand River Ave. I agree with you, it's a problem, and you're on a bend. Where the bend is, we put the chevrons in. We've done a number of things, and they work for a while, and then people get used to them and they start to speed up again. So it's not that it's being ignored, it's being worked on, and it's kind of a work in progress. You take little steps at a time and try and slow that traffic down. It all comes back to bad behavior, really. People are not driving at the speed limit, and they're speeding through there. So I guess to your concern, yes, we're aware of the concern, and the traffic engineers are looking at that on other mitigating factors to slow things down for you. Again, thanks for coming out. Appreciate it.
Any questions, Councillor Celeste? No. Councillor Utley.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Hi, Christine and Fred. Good to see you. I can just see part of Fred hiding in the background there. There he is. There he is. You guys got that beautiful home on the corner there. Yeah, Councillor Celeste and I have been involved for many years since we since the Holmdale area became part of our responsibility. So we're very familiar with speeding cars and cars that don't stop on Grand River Ave. And we've tried a number of things that Councillor Sless has mentioned. And sometimes it's a process of trying different things at different times to try and break the habits of these naughty drivers. One of the things that the Neighborhood Association will be distributing soon are slow down signs. And we're hoping they'll be mobile, that we can move them from area, like do a blitz in one area of the street or the neighborhood and then move it to another part of the neighborhood to try and change the behavior of these individuals. So I'm not sure the slow down signs will have the immediate impact that we're hoping for, but nothing ventured, nothing gained. So I think it's one of those things we just have to keep plugging away. And if if more stop signs will work, then we'll certainly look at that with our traffic department and come up with some different ideas. Some things that have a psychological effect. If you see a speeding driver, make out like you're videotaping them as they're driving along, and that may put a little bit of fear in them. I don't know, but anyway, it's a problem around the city, and with just a few, mostly a few bad drivers. But
sure.
Anyway, thank you for coming out tonight. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Good to see you again, Fred.
Councilor Van Tilburg.
Yes, Christine, do you have any thoughts regarding the one space per parking for the building and what might happen?
I do. There's not a lot of parking on Grand River Ave right now. And that was a very good point that Councillor Weaver brought up with although we're kind of looking forward to having a little bistro and wine bar down the street that we can walk to. But there are going to be other people in Brantford that want to check it out too, of course. And there's not going to be enough room for the parking for the cars of people that will come and enjoy the new bistro wine bar.
There's enough for the proposed residents, but that's it.
Yeah, we were just concerned because there is enough for the proposed residents, and most families do have 2 cars. I know we have 2 cars, and with both families, both husband and wives working, and a lot of them work out of town now because Brantford real estate is a great buy compared to Toronto. I can see there being a really big concern of parking.
Okay, thank you for that. I tend to concur with that. And my other question to you is, Grand River Ave is 40K around where you live right now?
Correct. Yes, correct.
So I just want to keep you informed that, and you heard it from your ward councilors earlier, it wouldn't be in that way without them. You wouldn't have gotten some of these restrictions without them. We have been supporting them in what they do. We will support them with regards to the development and the input that they come forward with. And it is a difficult thing. Like when you go and bring a speed down to 40K, and as you've mentioned, people are still infracting. And you're saying they're going through the stop sign. And look, remember, other parts of the community ask for those same things. So question about what we know, we tend to follow the lead of the ward councillors, even if we do look at it and we have our own perspective on the build. We tend to find that the ward councillors and those who live in the area have a greater context. So I appreciate you for coming out and informing us of what your neighborhood is like. And that will definitely goes into our thought process.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Councilor Carpenter. Councilor Carpenter.
Christine and Fred, thanks for coming. Just have one question for you. Would you be interested in seeing speed bumps along Grand River Ave?
Absolutely.
Fred says yes. I say yes, but is that doable? Because we have transport trucks that come along Grand River and the buses and that. Is that doable with the traffic?
I provided council a couple of years ago with a bunch of information about what they've done in Burlington, where the speed bumps are wide enough, and then you put markers in the middle of the center lane, and heavy trucks can go around them, ambulance go around them, fire trucks can go around them. but the average car cannot.
Yeah, they do it well in London, quite well. They're quite proficient. And most of the surveys in London do have some type of speed control via the speed bump. Not a speed bump, a speed
Lots
hump.
of cities are doing
Not a
them, yep.
bump.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Councilor Carpenter, thank you, Mr. and Mrs. Beal. That was very informative, and I think the board councilors enjoyed answering your questions. And I can assure you that most of us, most of us know the city pretty well, but generally most of us will go down and look at a property that's the subject matter of an application that comes before us. So,
as the entire council
yeah. Stay tuned. We'll be dealing with this quite shortly. Thank you very much for coming up.
I have one question here.
Fred still.
Actually, a couple of questions haven't been answered yet. One regarding the mollusks. Are they a shared mollusk?
Mollusk.
Mollusk. Sorry, I want to say mollusk because it's not a snail, it's a mollusk. And the other one is, are they 1 or 2 bedroom?
Yeah, what happens in this proceeding, you're here to tell us what you think and ask questions, and then the applicant, the representative of the applicant comes back after all the members of the public have spoken, and then generally we'll be asking those same questions to get answers.
And I will say for King and Benton and Steve, they've been fantastic to this point.
Yeah.
He's been knocking at my door every time he has some bit of information or a question or a concern or wants some input. They've been above and beyond my wildest expectations. So
Yeah, we appreciate being involved,
Yeah.
which is greatly appreciated.
Yeah.
We thank you.
Right. Well, we appreciate you coming here and being involved and giving us your input. So hopefully we'll have some answers from the applicant to those remaining questions you have.
Thank you.
Shortly. All right. So the next individual that would like to speak to this is Chris Zao. And Chris, if you could please come forward, or we'll bring you forward. And if you could state your full name, please, and your address, and then provide us with your comments.
Okay. Hi, how are you? My name is Chris, and I'm the neighbor. My property is 182 Grand River, just at the back of this property. So actually, I just have 2 questions. First one is parking lot. Of course, everyone talking too much parking lot problem tonight, but only concern is because there is 30 unit, and I think based on the city's planning, minimum is 1.5 parking space per unit. So that's why I just wonder why there's 33, because I'm very close to this project. That's why I wonder if some some tenant or property owner, they will probably parking their car in my property because it's too close, right? And that's his first question. Second question is, because I'm not a professional, when I'm looking at the site plan, so I worry about the green space. It doesn't have too much green space, so that's why. That is my 2 questions. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Zao. I think you were very clear about that. So members of the committee, does anybody have any questions for Mr. Zao? Not seeing any, but again, you, despite what you said, you did present your concerns, I thought, very cogently, and we appreciate you coming tonight to tell us that. And again, stay tuned. We'll be dealing with this very shortly.
If I could ask a question?
Yep. Well, sorry, go ahead, Councilor Martin.
Thank you. Chris, one of the things that we did with another development that had reduced parking is we're looking at preventing overnight parking on the streets around the development. Is that something that you think might help in this case?
I don't know. Just when I see the city planning things, they say for the condominium it should be 1.5 per unit. So that's why I calculated it should be 45. Right now it's 33, so short 12. Because I'm very close there. That's a project, so that's why I wonder someone probably just block my property, something. I'm not sure. So that's why.
Okay, we'll give some thought to the idea of restricting parking on the street to no overnight parking. And if that's something you think will help, just let your councilors know, and I'm sure they'll bring something forward.
Okay.
For coming.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor Martin. So pausing here, not seeing any other questions. Again, thanks very much, Mr. Zale. Next, I think there's one more individual who wants to speak to this, although I think there was some problem in getting internet connection with him, but let's see if he has been able to register. The Jet Janzik, I think.
Mr. Chair, in regards to, they've actually withdrawn and they'll be attending for the May 11th meeting.
Very good. So that appears to be all the members of the public that wish to have input and provide us with their perspective on this matter. So we'll now call upon the applicant again to provide us with a reply or response to any of those issues, questions that have arisen. I think we heard two. One was mine as well and repeated by the Beals, and that is the number of units, their size. And so, Mr. Johnson, you're back on.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll provide a brief response, and then Mr. Schray is also on the line, and I'll pass things over to him. So in response to the first question, we have 25 one-bedroom units, we have 4 two-bedroom units, and we have 1 3-bedroom unit. The previous condominium fee was a question, and that clocked in at just over $26,000 for that fee. And with regard to the Moloch system, what that is a garbage collection system where the bulk of the storage is held below grade. It's a relatively new system, but one that's been really been tried and tested out in the real world. There are examples in Brantford where it's being utilized. It does a great job at really controlling odor and associated vermin that are sometimes concerns with related to garbage. In terms of the 2 sites, the east and the west, both will have their own independent garbage collection. They will not be shared. Each condominium will be responsible for its own collection. And at this point, what I'll do is I'll ask if Mr. Schray can now speak. He would like to comment a little bit more on the parking experience that he's had in the past and provide some additional details. So over to Steve.
Absolutely. So, Mr. Schray.
Thank you for that. And I want to start off by thanking Mayor Davis and Council tonight for hearing this application. I also want to thank the neighbors, Kevin, Fred, Chris, not only for making time on this tonight, but making time for every time I request to get together with them over the last couple of years. And we're happy to be part of the Homedale neighborhood. I'd like to start off by providing some comments or some context, my experience with some of the issues or questions which were great tonight. In terms of parking, and that's a big issue, and that was a really big issue that we were looking at when we did the Morel redevelopment. We put 108 units over at Morel Street, and in that particular application, Nicole may remember, I think we proposed a 1.2 to 1, but we were weighted heavily also on transit, and we were weighted heavily also on walkability and bicycle traffic. So that site has a repair station, lots of bike storage, transit's being used, and Homedale is turning into a walkability community. And this particular site is closer to the downtown, and I think it'll lend itself to that. But what we found with 1.2 is we had extra parking spots that weren't being used. And those parking spots were conveyed back to the condominium corporation. So I think certainly, time's changing from when the zoning bylaw was looking at a 1.5 to 1 to where we are today. And it continues to evolve. And I think we look at that best we can on a project by project basis. In terms of bus passes, that's a great, we're excited about that. I think that's a fantastic idea, and we're looking forward to implementing that. Condo Reserve Fund study is it may be complete. It's underway. And I think Councilor Carpenter raised the question of aged infrastructure and the relationship of aged infrastructure to the reserve fund study. The reserve fund study is really limited to the building itself and the superstructure of the building inside the building. But what I can say with regards to the infrastructure, staff's identified the fact that infrastructure is aged in that area, and the improvements are weighted heavily for this development. So we're looking at new roads, new sidewalks, new underground infrastructure. That's an external levy to the project and is outside of the reserve fund study. And I think that's going to have a natural neighborhood improvement to the area. Molochs, that's something that was new for us a couple of years ago in Morel, and we didn't get it right off the bat with the frequency of pickup. We were doing it every 2 weeks, and once we reset that to once a week, it works like a charm. Very well, very clean, very quick, no odor. I think you're going to see more and more of that garbage collection system as people get more familiar with it, with various applications that council may have to consider. Tonight we're talking about the issues or the questions or comments with this development, but I'm glad that Councillor Sless and Fred and Chris raised that. There's other issues in this neighborhood, and developing in a neighborhood is about being part of the community. And tonight we're talking about an issue with a proposed development. But this neighborhood has other issues that we pull together and look at as a community. For example, the homeless issue that council's struggling with on a regular basis, and we've experienced that. And we get together as neighbors and we pull together and we figure out what we're going to do about it. So I'm happy to play a role with those issues to improve the neighborhood. In terms of timing, Councilor, one of the councilors, I think Councilor Weaver raised timing. We're anxious to get going. As a matter of fact, I think we've got confirmation from staff that we can submit for building permit, get our drawings in and submit, and have them reviewed while we're going through the approval process and site plan approval process. And we're at that stage, and we're ready to go on this application, and if we're successful in the next one as well. And I think the other important point I'd like to make is I was counting them as I was listening to this meeting. I think we're on our 12th or 13th brownfield site in Brantford, site that Councilor Weaver mentioned in West Brant. We're finally at the end. That's one of the most complicated sites we've been involved in with the Ministry of the Environment. But every one of these sites has their own challenges and their own uniqueness, and they're all subject to a record of site condition filing, which is governed by the Province of Ontario, the Ministry of the Environment. So we're happy to report that every one of these developments that come for consideration that we're involved in is a result of a brownfield being cleaned up, remediated, and coming back to life in the various neighborhoods that we're working in. So I just wanted to thank everybody. I was reflecting on the process, the neighborhood meetings, and we're excited. We're grateful for the fingerprints on this project. We're looking forward to doing more. I think Homedale is just a fascinating little neighborhood that's really starting to evolve. We happen to have a large parcel of land in close proximity to this, and we're looking forward to engaging with the neighborhood and the city to see what sort of dreaming we can do on that. So we appreciate the opportunity to have this application be heard, and we're looking forward to doing more good things in Brantford.
You're muted, Mr. Mayor.
Yeah, I think I just lost my Prism Fox, but I think Councillor Carpenter, before I lost it, I think I saw your hand up.
Yeah, thank you. Are any of these units fully accessible?
In response to the good question, I do understand that there's been recent changes to the building code that do require a percentage of accessible units. I'm a little outside my wheelhouse to comment a little bit beyond that. So that's the best that I could answer the question tonight.
Okay, I'll ask staff when we get back to the report. And just to the question about condominium reserve fund studies, I thought someone was trying to give me a lesson in condominium reserve funds. I know very well how they work. And they include everything that the condominium is going to own, just so, including any infrastructure in the ground. If that's part of the condominium, that's part of the reserve fund study. You might be confusing with an engineer's report of completion. Thank you.
So I've lost the participants box. Who had their hand up next? I know there was at least 3 before I lost it. Councilor Utley, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. At least I think I did. Question for the for Matt. Matt, how will the Molochs be managed to prevent unwanted dumping?
So and Steve, I may ask for your more direct experience with your other site, but ultimately the condominium corporation and the property management company that assists that condominium corporation, will handle that contract and make arrangements on scheduling, pickup, and addressing problems that may arise over time, similar to how Steve and the condominium corporation work to fix the site further to the west. So I think there can be comfort in that the condominium corporation is really in the driver's seat to direct the property manager to help fix problems as they may arise. Steve, is there anything else that you may be able to add there?
Yeah, I mean, the condo corporation will assume the initial operation of the Molochs. And, and initially when we installed these for the first time, we had a cycling of every 2 weeks. And that was changed right before we handed over the condominium complex to the corporation to once a week. And it's worked very well since that. So they assume the contracts, they have impact on the cycling if it's too frequently or not frequently enough.
Steve, it's the unwanted dumping that I'm concerned about. I don't know if you've had that experience at the lofts, but the last thing you want is people bringing their garbage over.
So our experience was that happened as a result of not being emptied soon enough. So every 2 weeks caused an overflow of different materials.
Yeah.
And every week has remedied that problem best we can tell. We've never seen an example of that since.
Okay, thanks, Steve. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Yeah, thank you. So I'm suffering a significant handicap. I don't have a participants box, so.
Councilor Martin is next, Mr. Mayor.
Yeah, so Councilor Martin, if you go next, please.
I'm the only one with a hand raised. Thank you. Is there going to be outlets for the parking spots for electric vehicle charging?
Currently, it's my understanding there are no plans to incorporate electric vehicle charging. There was a consideration by the province to introduce that as a requirement. But as the technology is evolving so quickly, they pump the brakes on that initiative for the time being, again, just to allow a little more certainty and standard as in efforts to make sure that we don't jump the gun and provide something that's not too dated in the near future.
Okay, well, you might consider roughing in the wiring so that the condo corporation doesn't have a huge bill to try and retrofit that later.
Any other questions for Mr. Fred? Not seeing any. Thanks very much, Mr. Johnson, Mr. Fred. And that now concludes the public hearing portion of this application. So to get the matter on the floor, I believe Councillor Utley, you're prepared to move the motion. I assume it was Councillor Celeste seconding that.
Yep, thank you, Mr. Mayor.
If you could please read the resolution then.
I will, with pleasure. Moved by myself and seconded by my ward mate, Councillor Celeste, that zoning bylaw amendment application PZ 1120 submitted by Urban Solutions Planning and Development Consultants, Inc., on behalf of King and Benton Redevelopment Corporation, affecting lands at 180 Grand River Ave to amend the mixed commercial residential exception 20 zone, FC320, to permit a 30-unit apartment building with site-specific positions be approved in accordance with the applicable provisions as noted in section 9.3 of report 2021-305, and B, that draft plan of condominium application 29 CD 2503 submitted by Urban Solutions Planning and Development Consultants, Inc., on behalf of King and Benton Redevelopment Corporation, affecting lands at 180 Grand River Ave, be approved, subject to the conditions included in section 9.5. Conditions of draft plan of condominium approval of report 2021-305. And C, that the bylaw to remove the holding H provision from the subject lands be presented to council for approval once the following conditions have been satisfied. 1, that the applicant has provided confirmation that a record of site condition RSC has been filed. 2, that the applicant has provided a signed site plan agreement to the city along with all necessary securities. And 3, that all servicing issues, financial and otherwise, have been addressed to the satisfaction of the city of Brantford. And D, that pursuant to sections 3418 and 5138 of the Planning Act RSO 1990C P13, the following statement shall be included in the notice of decision. Regard has been had for all written and oral submissions received from the public before the decision was made in relation to this planning matter, as discussed in section 8.2 and 9.4.1 of report 2021-305. With that, Mr. Mayor, I'm pleased to see this come before us, and that the developer has really done a strong job in satisfying the concerns of the community, other than maybe traffic and parking. So with that, I'll hand it to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Utley. Councillor Antosky.
Thank you. I'm happy to see what we have before us. I like the innovative approaches with the transit passes. I understand the concerns about parking and traffic, but here we have a development that is fitting into our long-term goals of, active transportation, walkability, and the only way that we're going to be able to make that transition, I think we have to keep in mind, is we make that transition when you've got new developments and people are coming in and moving into places with known restrictions, like only one parking spot. And you would hope that that also plays into the level of traffic. I think Councillor Martin brought up a good suggestion, because people will start to park on the side. They'll be looking for their parks. There's solutions to putting restrictions on that. So I think here we've got, Homedale is and is certainly heading towards being the trendy area in Brantford. And, there's real community there. Sylvia Collins and Dana and that whole community look out for each other. And I think that this is the start of the vision that we're looking for in Brantford. And we know how difficult that is to do in existing neighborhoods. We just talked about bike lanes, and it's difficult because we're taking things away from people. So if we can do it when something is started and it's something new, you're bringing the people in who know what they're getting. And so I think this is great. I think it's a great start. It's helping us move towards our long-term goals There's not huge opposition. There's some minor things that the developer and the councillors have worked out, and there's other solutions for some of these minor things. So I hope that we continue to see these so that in the long run, our whole community has these types of amenities, and that it becomes more of a cultural shift in things that we're used to, because it will take time. It's gonna, you know, we can't change over the older communities. We without feeling like we're taking things away. But in new ones, this is perfect. So I'm really happy to see this in front of us.
All right, next on the speakers list, I have Councillor Sluss.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm pleased to support this evening as well. I think this is kind of a sign of things to come. We're doing a lot of infill because we have to. A good portion of our development in Brantford has to be done in the built boundary. And when you try and shoehorn something into a site that's irregular, you're going to have problems, and you're going to have deficiencies in some areas, and you're probably going to have too much of some things in other areas. And it's something I think we're just going to have to be flexible enough to try and accommodate. As was indicated, we're putting another brownfield back into a productive use, and I think that's a good thing. We've worked on these for years, and we're lucky we have folks that will step up and clean sites up that some folks and a lot of developers won't touch. So I think all in all, that's a good thing. I know in this particular instance, the public engagement, I think there was 5 public meetings. There was a number of meetings, that was public meetings. Then there were meetings with the neighborhood association. And we've had an extensive amount. Councilor Utley and I spent a lot of time at meetings over this development because the community was demanding it, and we made sure that it happened. And the community got to have their say. And I think what come out the other end is something that the community, for the most part, can live with. One kind of different note on this project that I've never seen done before, the developer put up $1,000 prize in the neighborhood through the neighborhood association to name the building. And I thought that was pretty neat. It got the community involved in the development that's in their neighborhood. And I'm sad to say I don't know what the name was, but there was a winning name, and that's what the building will be labeled as. And some lucky person walked off with $1,000 for coming up with the idea. So I think there were just a lot of good things that were kind of unique that I've never dealt with in a proposal before in a development. And I think all in all, we're never going to please everybody on anything, on everything. It just, that's not human nature. So I think a good job has been done to satisfy the concerns of the many. And I'm sure there are a few that oppose it. And I'm sure anywhere in the city, if we put in a 4-story, 30-unit building, you're going to have screams of too much traffic, not enough parking. That's human nature. And I get that. Whether it's real or perceived, it doesn't matter. It's real if you think it's real, and people think it's real. So having said that, I'm pleased to support it, and I look forward to seeing a new building in the ward. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Sluss. Next speaker, Councillor Carpenter.
Yeah, I'm pleased to support this as well. I just sort of went through my condominium act guidelines just to make sure I was correct. I just want to make sure staff on the side connect with me to make sure we know the difference between a reserve fund study, as I do, and I know staff does, and what a performance audit is. So I just want to make sure we get that clarification with staff later. Thank you.
So any other speakers before I call the question? Seeing none. Julie, if you please administer the vote.
Item 5.1, application for zoning bylaw amendment PZ 1120 and draft plan of condominium 29 CD 20503 for 180 Grand River Avenue is approved unanimously on a recorded vote. Those in favor, Mayor Davis, Councillor Sluss, Martin, Antosky, Wall, Van Tilburg, Carpenter, Utley, and Weaver, noting Councillors Vanderstel and McCreary's conflicts of interest.
All right, I'm now very happy to turn the chair back to Councillor Antosky for the balance of the meeting.
Thank you, Mayor. Members of the committee, we've got 2 delegations for tonight's meeting. Both registrations are for item 7.1.6, item 1, the Mohawk Lake District. So first we have Rita Marie Hadley and Scott Lyons from the Lansdowne Children's Center. If you can both come forward and state your names, and we look forward to hearing you speak about the real estate strategy item listed on this item for Mohawk Lake, or sorry, Mohawk District. In 10 minutes.
Good evening. Thank you, Madam Chair. My name is Scott Lyons. I'm locally born and raised business owner, and I'm a past chair of the board at Lansdowne Children's Center. And I've just remained involved over the last number of years to help steward the center through this process for a new build. We've been here before. I think many of you are familiar with us. We will skim through a little bit of our backstory quickly tonight and focus on what's new since the last time we were here before you, and leave room for as many questions as we can. Next slide, please.
So to quickly recap, Lansdowne 101, rehab, respite, recreation for our community's children who live with physical, communication, or developmental disabilities. That's our business. In terms of what those conditions might be that bring kids to us, it may be cerebral palsy, spina bifida, autism, spinal muscular dystrophy or atrophy, a whole range of conditions. But I want you to picture the families, the kids who are your constituents, who live with the challenges and who have the ability to do great things by having these resources in our community. Next slide, please. Lansdowne has been supporting this community since 1952, and just like the kids have been growing, so have our numbers as the community has grown, and we've been able to bring more services together into a hub here in our community, serving 3,000 plus kids each year with 250 staff, and it's the growth that has brought us to you to look for a solution together. We've also managed that growth with off-site leases, tripled the number of kids we serve annually, and we've also developed 4 Haldeman and Norfolk sites, which we fully served during this past year. The challenge is that crowding results in kids' services being delayed, and in the life of a child, that is a significant challenge, and it can be very detrimental. So we want to work with council around a solution, and the solution is that we can't grow. We need a solution to being unable to grow on our current site, being landlocked on 2.3 acres. Next slide, please.
That is a little bit of a summary of really what's been going on and how we've dealt with this at Lansdowne over the last 15 years or so. A lot of optimization and tweaking of the physical location that we have now. And then the last 5 years or so, as you know, responding to council's expression of interest regarding the Mohawk Lake District, and working through design on that space and a little bit of redesign and back and forth. And so we were here in front of Committee of the Whole back in November, and on the next slide, I will show a little bit of the changes, but really what we've been able to do there is just adapt with staff who have been fantastic in really helping steward us, as well as Dedwada Desney, which I believe will be speaking next on how we've been able to partner to make the most of this, the best of this. We had a very favorable public information session just last month in the community, and it's wonderful to see just the positive response that we are getting from the community to have Lansdowne be part of that district. Next slide, please. That is a portion. You'll have the full diagram of the district, which I know you have seen before. That's on 8.1 on page 156 of your package. When we first came in, we needed to proceed with our planning, just a spot to pick and say, let's try and plan for our building here. So we picked that corner spot that is just to the top left there. It was orange. It was sort of the gateway, the primary location, I guess, in the district. And as we have gone through and city staff and working with planning consultants, added a little bit of a buffer to that area, peeled that size back a little bit, and then ultimately The orange colored areas in that district were really meant to be for commercial, residential, mixed use. And so staff asked us, along with the Droit de Desne, if we could look and consider if it would work for us. The blue section there being institutional. There were two sections, and so in doing that and in working out something that would come together, we have come up with a realignment that will both speak to of sort of those two sections to allow both organizations to have their physical build there, with buildings reoriented with the use of parking for buffers to the industrial use to the one side, and also shared parking to make the use of that space the best. Next slide, please.
So here you can see on 66 Mohawk Street, we've been able, by having our architects work together, have our buildings face into each other. It creates a green space in the middle, and it allows us to maximize parking by having it adjacent to each other for planning for peak times. It lets us be close to families in the neighborhoods that we serve, in the downtown, in the East Ward and Eagle Place. And it also allows us to be flexible and relating to the neighborhood in terms of the amenities that after hours can also be available for use by the community immediately in the neighborhood. Next slide, please. Here's a close-up on it. So it gives you an idea. We've flipped the layout that was previously tested at 22 Mohawk Street. And in looking at the alignment of the respite, which would have the overnight component for medically fragile kids, closer into the residential component of the Droit de Desne, internal on the land, and then the part that's closer to the street, the pool, and the main entrance, so that a nice storefront facing to the neighborhood gives us that orientation. I think it's an exciting part to the neighborhood because it allows not only our families and our kids to experience integration, it allows the community to also enter and participate with what we have here. It's allowing us to consolidate some of our off-site leases and incorporate a pool and our overnight respite with appropriate parking. So this is a site that would work for us in that regards. Next slide, please. We share this with you because we are fortunate for Brant families to be able to have this service in our community. There's only 20 other centers in Ontario that provide these children's rehab services. And we are requiring the alignment of the resources to be able to leverage land to move ourselves forward in the approval pipeline. Our colleagues in Chatham were fortunate that they were funded in the spring 21 budget, and this would also follow on Hamilton, which is a structure that was built in 2017 on a remediated brownfield, as well as Halton, Peel, Durham, and Ottawa. So we're looking to have the equity for the young people in Brant who live with disabilities to have this access. Next slide, please.
And so again, that is the rendering of our potential building, reoriented a little bit on the new space. And again, as you look tonight to go forward with this memorandum of understanding, as Rita Marie has mentioned, this allows us to proceed with our ministry and the other levels of government to really show that we have a commitment from the city of Brantford. We have a place to go as we work towards an agreement of purchase and sale. And we are definitely on the radar as our children's treatment centers across the province, as Rita Marie has said. So we thank you for that consideration. For those of you on the Mohawk Lake working group that we have worked so closely with for the past 5 years. This is really an exciting time, and just that we can put all of our kids back under a single roof and have families that need this care, get it in Brantford under the same roof. And you know, it is the same type of thing that supports Brantford to be a more accessible and livable community for everyone. So thank you very much. Rita Marie and I are happy to take any questions that you might have. Thank you.
All right, we've got a little less than a minute left, folks. We've got 3 councillors. Councilor Van Tilburg, you're first.
And be very brief. Either one of you choose. I know I've grilled you with some tough questions in the past about your thing, but the vision and what you're looking forward to moving into, I want to know, how do you feel about it? What do you think it brings? Like, just give me the vibe of this change and how moving into this area, just you tell me.
You have to look at our kids. When they look at the picture of that rendering, they get very excited. It's a lever to possibilities. We have young kids with potential. They live with challenges, but their optimism is what has me very optimistic.
Thank you. I'm gonna let my other councillors try and squeeze one in.
Councillor McCreary.
Madam Chair, thank you. Welcome, folks. Good to see you again. With respect to parking, are you willing to share your parking facility with other site users if possible?
The planning actually did take into consideration the ability to be flexible, and prior to the planning department redesignating 22 Mohawk Street, we had actually met with the Canadian Industrial Heritage Centre and their partners in the theatre around for event purposes, whether that was accessible. That was prior to being moved around, so it's not as adjacent, but the ability to be in consideration of a neighborhood, I think, allows neighbors to talk about what can you do when you need overflow and big event access.
I'll take that as either a yes or a maybe. Thank you.
All right, thank you. We're out of time. Thank you, Rita Marie and Scott, for coming forward.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, next we have item 6.2. We have Joanne Matina and Constance McKnight, and I always try to avoid this, but despite my better judgment, I'm going to try it. De droit des nez, sorry if that was horrible, from the Aboriginal Health Centre. And we have 10 minutes, including your presentation and questions, please.
Ani, Tanzi, Buzu, good evening. Thank you for the consideration of our application. We would like to provide clarification for council members and members of the public on programs and services offered by the Deitwatedezneh Aboriginal Health Centre and our potential partners for the Wellbeing Centre. Unlike the previous presentation, we haven't updated any of our slides, and part of the lack of progress on that front is really having to do with the pandemic response and the third wave that we're in. Currently, Deitwatedezneh owns the property at 36 King, and we rent at 72 Brent. We're the only organization in Brent County area providing a blend of Western and traditional Indigenous medicine to support the urban Indigenous population. Our commitment is to connect people of the Indigenous community in local neighborhoods to support health and well-being by integrating resources that meet broader determinants of health. Deitwatedezneh may have been successfully providing culturally safe programs and services that are relationship-based, welcoming, and individually directed since 1998. We provide primary care and health promotions programs that are well sought after and currently have wait lists. Deitwatedezneh's Aboriginal Health Centre is the place of first choice and last hope for Indigenous peoples in Brant County. Next slide, please. So at Deitwatedezneh, we have 4 major departments. One is primary care, which is really for Indigenous folks and their families. We have a healthy living department, which is really the provision of health promotions, diabetes education, and some diabetes education programming, like reflexology, retinal screening, hearing assessments, that type of thing. And everything in the in the healthy living department is open to Indigenous and non-Indigenous folks alike. We have a mental health and addictions department. In that department, we have addictions counseling and group programming. We have mental health counseling. We have outreach, peer outreach, and we have children's mental health. And in terms of mental health and addictions programs are for Indigenous folks and their families. And cultural wellness and outreach is really for Indigenous folks, where we provide patient navigation, medical transportation, and traditional healing. Many of the traditional healing programs and ceremonies are open to non-Indigenous folks alike. As well. So next slide, please. Here you'll see our conceptual model. The potential partnerships that we've been exploring include Indigenous housing in the range of 20 to 40 mixed units, Indigenous community programming and support offered through the Brantford Regional Indigenous Support Center, and youth education and employment opportunities through NAPAM. In Brantford, NAWASA offers the Canada Prenatal Nutrition Program and the Community Action Program for Children. Our facilitators work alongside elders and knowledge keepers to provide physical, mental, emotional, and cultural services. In addition, we are exploring opportunities to include pharmacy and other services to support the social determinants of health. This is a very unique building and a great concept, we feel, because it brings the community together in a way that includes Indigenous and non-Indigenous folks alike. And really, it's about building the sense of community. That's what we've been doing since the beginning. And that's all I have. Next slide. Any questions?
Great, thank you. We've got about 5 minutes left. I've got Councillor Utley. Your hand is up.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Constance, good to see you again. That's a pretty impressive looking building you've got there. What would be the approximate square footage that you're planning on?
Joanne Matina is actually the lead on the project. She's the lead. Joanne?
I'm thinking, I don't have the number right in front of me, but it's approximately around 96,000 square feet.
96,000
square feet.
Okay, that's good size. Secondly, the programs will be, or some programs will be offered to non-Indigenous folks like me, and I think that's so wonderful. How will that work? How will you engage the non-Indigenous population?
Well, we currently have a number of non-Indigenous folks who take part in our center. I think that the major issue for us has been space. So it would be wonderful to be in a larger space where we can invite more and more folks in. I know that we have one program in particular where it's really difficult to fit more than 30 people in a very tight space.
Yeah.
And that program in Hamilton and Brantford actually has more than 50 registrants every time, and there are 10 sessions. And people show up every time. It's amazing. And I think that once we have a presence in the neighborhood, that will bring people in. Our intention really is to engage youth with after-school programming, be they Indigenous or not. We want to develop safe community. That's our sense, and that's our purpose, really.
Thank you both for all you do.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. We've got Councillor Wall next, please.
Awesome. Hey, thanks guys so much for your presentation and for being here. And I did want to say thank you for taking the time to invite me to have a conversation with you guys about everything that you're doing. And I mean, I didn't know, and I'm so thankful that I do know, and I'm blown away by the hard work of your staff and your team, especially, with the way the world is right now. My question I wanted to ask was, you both, I believe, attended the open public houses that we had with community members, and you did a great presentation and you answered questions and provided feedback. But I was wondering if you could just share your experience with that and anything that you've taken from that and have incorporated.
I can't think of anything off the top of my head specifically. It's been a very long day. Joanne?
Yeah, so what I've taken from, and I've heard, and both Connie and I have reported back to our board, is the neighborhood's concern over the housing units and what type of housing that they're going to be. And we have confirmed with our potential partners who are coming in, whether it's being Brantford Native Housing or the Ontario Aboriginal Housing Services, that there'll be mixed residential units. They're not going to be at, they're going to be at a fair market value. They're not going to be like ghettoized or anything like that. We don't want that for our community. We don't want that for the neighborhood. And also listen to the concerns of the neighborhood regarding a safe injection site or a methadone clinic. We don't provide those services. We provide the addictions counseling and group programming to assist them and to give alternatives to addictions and help provide the cultural teachings. We have children on board in our programming that we deal with, and we also will be partnering with Nawasakandaswantag and co-locating with Lansdowne. That's not something we're interested in bringing in. We do provide some addiction support to the RAM clinics, which are the rapid access to addictions medicine, which are already in Brantford, and that's done on their site and not in our site for those type of services.
And if I could ask, oh, sorry, go ahead.
Now I've lost it.
No, that was I'm sorry.
No, I apologize.
My final question, Councilor Antosky, if I may. If any member of Eagle Place, East Ward, or downtown wanted to reach out to your organization because they had questions about what this site could potentially look like, who's their point of contact and how would they contact them?
They could contact me. I am the capital lead for the project, so they could either reach out to our main phone number or they could email me directly, and I'm happy to share that information with council.
Thank you so much.
Sorry.
I did it again. I'm sorry.
I'm doing it. I did remember, and that is that the housing units our partner, and it's looking more so like it will be our partner, is the Ontario Aboriginal Housing Services Organization, and not all of their units are Indigenous specific. So that may be something that the neighborhood might be interested in when that building is built.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, and last we have Councilor Van Tilburg. You got about a minute.
Yeah, I want to thank you for the candidness in your answers in those community open forums. You have reaffirmed, as I said, repetition is the key. So my question to you, thank you for reassuring to the community. Thank you for saying that you're going to still continue engaging with the community. I would like to know, similar as I asked Lansdowne, what do you see there and how does it make you feel in the Mohawk Lake Greenwich?
Okay, so what I see, and I'll close my eyes because I can actually envision it. I see a place where community can come together, non-Indigenous folks can walk in the door and feel very welcome and invited in. We're into a place that's full of culture and education so that folks can get to understand the Indigenous community. I've done a lot of previous work on stigma and discrimination, and I think that the best way to break down that stigma and discrimination is to bring everybody under the same tent and everybody get to know each other. So that's what I envision. I envision a place where after school programs can happen for the community, and so where kids can grow up in a vibrant community. I mean, community to me is so important because I'm old enough to remember what it was like to have a vibrant community where everybody knew who you were and you couldn't do anything without the neighbor knowing and calling your mom, and that's the kind of thing that I want to bring back. I think that that's something that we're missing as a society. So that's my dream, and that's what I'm hoping for. And I think that this is the perfect location to do it.
Thank you so much, Constance and Joanne, for coming forward. We're out of time now, but we'll be dealing with this item very shortly. So thank you. So now we'll consider the items that were separated for discussion purposes. And Councillor Martin, it looks like you've got the motion to place all separated items for consideration consent not previously voted on the floor, please.
Thank you. I can't seem to find that. If staff could put that on the screen, please. I move, seconded by Councillor McCurry, that all items for consent, items 7.1 and 7.2, separated for discussion purposes, be approved.
All right, thank you. We're going to start with item 1 of 7.1.6, which is the Mohawk Lake District Work Group report. And we have, it's Councilor McCreary. I believe you have an amendment for that.
I have an amendment.
Did you wish me to introduce that now, Madam Chair?
Yes, Councilor Van Tilburg, I have yours as well, but yours is on item 2. Okay, so go ahead, Councilor McCreary.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. I'm the mover. Councilor Martin is the seconder. The amendment reads as follows: that clause E be amended by deleting the wording following the words "be reserved" and replacing with "for the future development and/or expansion of a consolidated cultural museum and community center." Madam Chair, I simply think that the wording better defines what lies ahead of us, and council should be aware that tonight's chair and I will be introducing something following on the heels of this next week that will further explore some uses for the site.
Do you have a seconder, Councilor McCreary?
Sorry, yes, it's Martin.
Thank you. Sorry if I missed that. All right, do we have any discussion on the amendment? Councilor Vanderstel.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Could we please see the proposed amendment on the screen again? I think it went up and went down faster than I could read it. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Okay, I see no further hands, so I'll call the vote on the amendment.
Actually, Councilor Antosky, sorry, I'm having trouble with the raised hand. I did have a question, so.
Okay, go ahead then, Mayor, please.
Yeah. I wanted to ask staff, from a staff perspective, and given the process, and this has been, 2 to 3 years in length, a lot longer than that, any concerns or issues in respect to this amendment?
Through the chair, Heidi DeVries, General Manager of People, Legislative Services and Planning. The original language that was provided by staff spoke specifically to the future development or expansion of a museum district or as part of the community park to be developed on the adjacent lands. The language presented before you today is somewhat more restrictive. So I don't have the language in front of me again. I don't know if the clerk would mind putting it back up on the screen. But essentially what you're seeing here is that this parcel of land that we were recommending be reserved for a future use, which was yet to be defined by the corporation, would be restricted to the expansion of a consolidated cultural museum and community center. So unless all 3 uses were available on the site, then these lands would not be able to be developed for anything else without a reconsideration of council. So if you would like to restrict that particular parcel of land, for the use provided here today, then you may want to move that amendment. Otherwise, staff may recommend, just given that some of the visioning for this particular parcel of land wasn't concluded, and we were recommending that this be set aside because the exact parameters of the future park haven't been defined yet. We know that there's a desire to see a potential expansion of a museum district. There are some other third-party organizations who are not yet ready to move forward with their plans, including, as you've seen in the report to the working group, the Children's Safety Village, perhaps other museums in the area that may not include a community center, but may just simply have a museum. So staff would recommend that perhaps we add this language on to the existing language rather than a full repeal and replace, just to allow council some additional room to maneuver should another use come forward at a future date. But essentially the recommendation by staff was informed by the fact that we know that there may be other community uses out there that may wish to locate in the future, and those have not yet been identified.
So are you saying then that you're suggesting we leave in the words reserved, or?
So through the chair, we're suggesting we leave in that the lands be reserved. Essentially, the recommendation from staff to the working group were that the lands be reserved by the city because a use had not yet been determined. If the desire is to see a potential combined use, as you see in the councillor's wording before you, and only that combined use with all those 3 uses combined, that's a much more restrictive reservation than the one that was proposed by staff. So we would recommend perhaps adding that so it could be reserved for the expansion or development of a museum district generally, or as part of the future park, or as a consolidated, community center, cultural or museum space. But restricting it to that one particular use would require a very unique end user, which I'm not sure we currently have here in the city, and one that would require capital funding to build that type of development. And one of the things on staff's mind when we made these recommendations was sustainability in the district. So we know that often, museum uses or cultural uses compete for grant funding or other funding through third parties. And we wanted to ensure that whatever landed on these lands was going to be sustainable so that we could ensure the future use and benefit for the community.
So is the concern also with the word "and"? Am I hearing that then? Okay.
So through the
In the
chair,
sense it's got to be all three uses all wrapped into one.
Right. So I think again, I'm going off memory now, but I think it said the development and or expansion. If it's all three uses wrapped into one, I think that's where there may be a concern. So it says of a consolidated cultural / museum and community center. So that's a very specific type of use that you would be predetermining in the reservation. And you may just want to, I think again, I can't speak to the intent of the councilor. I'm sure he could speak to that himself, but it may just be that it's a more broad reservation for something of the cultural, museum and community center nature, which would be appropriate in staff's opinion for this particular piece of property.
Okay, Mayor, you're out of time. Do you want me to put you back on the list? Or do you want to go back on the list? Yes. Okay. All right. Thank you. Councilor McCurry.
Darn that button. Madam Chair, thank you very much. I will attempt to offer a little clarity. First of all, the words "be reserved" remains in the resolution. It's everything after that gets changed, okay? I think there may be some misunderstanding there. And what I'm really looking to do is to pave the way for the opportunity to blend two streams of investigation, namely the cultural hub, and secondly, the museum sustainability plan, to look at that as a future site. Councilor Antosky and I will be bringing a resolution that speaks further to that, and that also includes evaluation of the opportunity to relocate the farmers market to the same facility and to create some community space where organizations like the Christmas Baskets program and the book fair can locate as well. So we have a vision of something much grander there. And that's why we wish to incorporate the wording which is before you today. If staff have an issue with that, we're certainly amenable to looking at some wording changes there. But I think it's important that the committee recognize the intent of the amendment. And in my opinion, I thought we were being certainly broader based, but I will certainly, as I said, be willing to accept anybody's amendment that will further clarify. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Next, we've got Councilor Van Tilburg, please.
Yeah, the amendment falls within the vision statement of the Mohawk Lake District. So what I'd like to get clarity. Do we create the criteria before we have participants coming to the door with a proposal, or do we let that proposal try to shape it? Because when you say we limit it, like I thought it was expanding with those comments, and I don't want to have any limitations. I would like to know how to word that properly to have it so that it is inclusive, not restrictive. And I also would like to know the chicken and the egg factor. I mean, we kind of just went through this with our current, but we have a roadmap with a visioning statement. So if we could just get some clarity on how to do this.
Right, through the chair, I think I'm grasping the councilor's intent. I think if you just indicate in the resolution wording before you, the amended wording before you, to replace it with for the future development and or expansion or one or more of the following: a cultural museum or community center or combination thereof. So essentially what you would be getting there is all those uses that Councilor McCurry was speaking to, but it could be one or more or a combination. It doesn't have to be all three of those uses in that one space. And in terms of the chicken and egg, you know, there has been quite a lot of visioning for this site, and I would agree with the councillor's comment that the proposal from Councillor McCurry would be in keeping with that visioning, that these lands would be set aside as a transitional institutional space that could accommodate any one or more of those uses. In terms of waiting for someone to come forward, you could certainly just say that the lands be reserved for the city of Brantford for a future use in keeping with the vision of the Mohawk Lake District Plan. That's probably the most expansive language. But we understood that there was a desire to see perhaps a museum district in this area, and that the reservation for the museum district and or the expansion of a future parkland might ensure that that vision come forward. So, and I think that's what you're hearing here today, that there may be something in the works for that vision to come forward in the near future.
Very good. So does an amendment to the amendment required, or would Councillor McCurry just be able to kind of like snap his fingers and say, that's what I would like to do? I see. I think so. I think a snap would be great.
I think he just snapped his fingers.
Wonderful.
So is that friendly, Councillor McCurry? The wording that Heidi has suggested?
10-4.
All right, and your seconder agrees? Where are you on the screen? There you are. Okay, thank you, Councillor Martin. All right, so that is friendly as amended. We have first time speaker, Councillor Van Tilburg.
You almost fell for the Van Tilburg trap.
I did. Sorry.
Good for you. Sorry, clerks, could you put the amended wording, proposed amended wording on the screen, just so that we're clear about how expansive this language is? Thank you very much. Yep, thank you very much. Please go ahead. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Mayor Davis.
Yeah, can I ask staff, can you put up, it's from page 7 of the report. It's 153 of 217. It's the plan, the proposed very general overview plan of these lands. I want to make sure I understand exactly what we're talking about.
I've paused your time, Mayor Davis.
Thanks, I appreciate that.
Sorry, I'm just pulling it up here.
Oh, good. That's it. So is this the land that applies this, or the part of these lands? Is that blue area, the top 3.1 acres? Is that what it is?
Through the chair, that is correct.
Okay. So, Councillor Antosky, through you, I understand the intent, and I understand what it is that is trying to be achieved here. But I guess I'm a little bit concerned about the process now, having sat on this task force for the last 2 years. And it's been a process that, you know, various groups express an interest, in particular in these institutional lands, the blue ones. And then, you know, kind of goes out to the community, and the response from the community, you know, what do you think of it? And I'm concerned that we're, you know, short-circuiting that to some degree. And also my concern would be the 15.3 acres, which is that green area. There hasn't been a lot of conversation about what that will be and what that'll be used for. And who knows, it could be an associated woodland cultural center. I mean, who knows perhaps that might be expanded, it might be reduced. So I guess my concern is it's the cart before the horse. And we've really only done this with other parts of these lands, like for example, that 4.4 acres, that's a military museum, and so that's been designated for museum. And the 2 acres, the other purple, that's the timekeeper's building. So that because of what was sitting there and what was on that, it's reserved for the Industrial Heritage Museum. So my concern, as I said, is that this 3.1, we may be putting the cart before the horse here, even though I could well be in favor of some kind of museum type facility there. So I guess with that, I can't support it even with the amendment.
All right, any further sorry, Mayor. Any further speakers on the amendment? Seeing none, I will call the vote on the amendment.
The amendment carries on a recorded vote of 8-3. Those in favor, Councillors Sless, Martin, Antosky, Wall, Van Tilburg, McCurry, Utley, and Weaver. Those against, Mayor Davis, Councillors Vanderstel, Councillor Carpenter.
You're muted, Madam Chair.
You're still muted.
Bear with me. Sorry, I had all these things come up on my screen. I couldn't push the button. All right, there we go. So we're just going to deal with item 1 of this full resolution right now. Is there any further discussion on item 1, which is the real estate strategy for the Mohawk Lake District Working Group as amended? Seeing none, I'll call the vote, please.
Sorry, through the chair, I'm just having some technical issues. Just bear with me for one moment, please.
No problem. Thanks, Julia.
And Councillor Martin, we're just waiting on your vote.
My iPad is locked up. I vote in the affirmative.
Thank you. Item 7.1.6, item 1 regarding the Mohawk Lake District Working Group report, real estate strategy as amended is approved unanimously on a recorded vote. Those in favor, Mayor Davis, Councillors Weaver, Vanderstelt, Utley, Sless, McCurry, Martin, Carpenter, Antosky, Van Tilburg, and Wall.
Thank you. Next, we're going to move to item 2 of the same item, Mohawk Lake District Working Group, and there is an amendment by Councillor Van Tilburg. If you'd like to go ahead with your amendment, Councillor.
Yes, moved by myself, and I believe it's seconded by Councillor Carpenter. Is that correct? Yes. Amendment Mohawk Lake report that clause B and C be struck and replaced with the following. B, that the mandate be expanded as follows. 1, the mandate of the Mohawk Lake District Working Group include the following tasks. 1, to provide guidance to staff in the process of executing an overall disposition and retention strategy for the Mohawk Lake District lands. 2, to provide guidance to staff in the overall holistic implementation of the municipal projects related to the overall implementation of the recommended Mohawk Lake District Plan. And 3, to support and assist the community engagement with residents and to assist in identifying community partners who may be able to support the implementation of the Mohawk Lake District Plan. 2, this task force is to be supported by 1, the City of Brantford staff liaisons selected by the Chief Administrative Officer who will provide technical and operational advice and staff assistance. 2, long-range planning staff and designate to assist with the agenda preparation, minute talk taking, and meeting preparations. And 3, the other staff as needed to support the mandate and deliverables of the task force. Number 3, that the Mohawk Lake District Working Group continue to meet quarterly at minimum, and its composition and reporting structure remain the same. And 4, that the term of the task force be established until such a time as the task force, in consultation with support staff, recommends their disbandment having achieved their mandate.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Wall on the amendment, please.
Excellent, thank you. So I don't sit on this task force because Councilor Van Tilburg does. I'm wondering if there is a seat or a place for a representative from the neighborhood association, or if they have any connection or collaboration or communication with the neighborhood association.
Just waiting to see who's going to pop up from staff here. Tara, how are you? Go ahead, Tara.
Hello, everyone. I'm Tara Tran, Senior Planner for the City of Brantford, through you, Madam Chair. At this time, the members of the task force are representatives of each ward and Mayor Davis. That was how the task force was established at the beginning. It would be up to council to determine if other membership should be included.
Excellent. So, I mean, I don't necessarily know how I would word this. It's just, I know just from being one of the councilors for the ward that the neighborhood association is doing a tremendous job for making sure that the people who live in the community, it's complementary to what we do as council. So I'll leave it to my ward mate to figure out how he'd like to handle that. But ultimately, I just know that I think that they may want to sit at the table. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wall. Councillor Carpenter, please.
Thank you. Yeah, the committee needed to change the mandate, and that was the direction given to staff, and staff have done that here in advance. But I take Councillor Wall's concerns as very, very important. They're valid. So we could maybe end that a member of the neighborhood association be invited to come to the committee. I wouldn't say they have a voting position, but they certainly should be there to comment. And I would just, if it's all right with the mover, Councilor Van Tilburg, just end that a member of the neighborhood association be invited to attend the meetings. Thank you.
Councillor Carpenter, can you confirm where you're asking to have that added?
I was just adding it on the end. Hang on.
So number
staff support, I would just add that a member of the local neighborhood association be invited, and we can take some advice from our solicitor if she's got a better idea.
Go ahead, Heidi. Thanks.
So through the chair, thanks for the vote of confidence, Councillor Carpenter. I popped on because I do want to say we have worked with the neighborhood association and we appreciate the representatives of the neighborhood association, but the neighborhood association is one of many stakeholders on this project. The meetings of the working group are open to the public with very few exceptions, and we can certainly just take that back as direction to staff to ensure that these meetings are circulated to the neighborhood association, and I would add other stakeholders in the community. And you know, I think one of the best examples is the public information center that we held, or it was actually an open house. We were delivering flyers by hand with members of the neighborhood association, you know, distance, but walking the neighborhood, and others in the neighborhood and in the Eagle Place community. It's an incredible community of people who are very engaged, and they will not cease to be a part of this because of the expanded mandate. In fact, I think they'll probably be at the table more. They have delegated, they have provided comments, and you know, I think they've been doing what we saw you know, Constance do, is they've closed their eyes and they've dreamed and visioned about this property for a long time. And we're here to work with them to see this vision come to life and work with you as members of council. So I would just say we will definitely circulate the meeting invitations, but we'll do that for other stakeholders who wish to be engaged as well.
Okay, I'll leave it as direction. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Carpenter. Councillor Van Tilburg, please.
The input into the Mohawk Lake District, Mohawk Greenwich Brownfield sites, the thing has been community driven pretty much since day one. We're only here at their behest, quite frankly. And when you look at the visioning, that has been the whole broader community bringing forward that vision, and Eagle Place has been a significant portion of that input. I believe when the task force unless you create, I think, a different task force like we've had in the past with the Brownfield Committee and the input, I believe what has been successful has been our open, well-attended public meetings of the past. And certainly they were far more significant pre-COVID, but there's still a lot of potential with the online. I also happen to think that it's there's a group there that's not online as much as we are, and they tend to be missing out. But the people have been doing the work, and if we look at what just went through when we did the last the two presenters earlier today, the input from the Mohawk or from the neighborhood association and the legwork that they did in getting the word out, I can't see them ever going away in any way, shape, or form. I think so. I will follow with staff's recommendation that everybody, including the neighborhood association, get the word out and to the public, and that the neighborhood association do what they have been doing, all the neighborhood associations for that matter, and that is getting the word out to the public, informing us and keeping us clear on what they wish to see there, what's going well, and what they don't like. So I think that was a valid point my ward mates brought up. They've been integral, as has the whole community. So I don't know how to change that any other way. So I think we'll have to go with the resolution as written.
Thank you. Mayor Davis on the amendment, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, so this amendment comes out of a discussion we had at the task force actually last week, and it's a refinement of an amendment that Councillor Carpenter had put on the floor, and it comes out of recognizing that this group, this task force, has really been focused on the Mohawk Greenwich lands, but there's a lot of confusion because there is the Mohawk Lake District Working Group. Joy O'Donnell is the president, and there's a number of community members that are on that group. There's a representative of the elected council, Six Nations, and so far they've been very much focused on improving the water quality of Mohawk Lake. But as the city has taken their advice and has implemented certain public work projects like oil and grit separators are dealing with that, it's kind of now moving that group towards what do we do with the lands and the shores of the canal and the lake, and working with Six Nations because the glebe lands is part of the reserve. But there's some confusion now about, okay, this group that we have here in front of us and that group and Mohawk Lake and the canal, and that's why the words overall holistic implementation. Also because that area in the green, that open space, which was next to that area we've reserved for museum, community center, etc. I mean, the lands that are closest to those lands are the glebe lands right across the canal. And, so you have to consider the interests of the Six Nations when determining what might be done with that, plus the Woodland Cultural Center. There's maybe some thought that the Woodland Cultural Center might be involved in that, what we call that green or open space. So that's what the overall holistic implementation is talking about. It's trying to expand the horizon of this task force to more than just what do you do with the lands in Mohawk Greenwich. And it kind of came out because what we just passed, the resolution we just passed, deals with those lands that are the orange ones, and how do you move that forward. And so this is really trying to bring into the mandate of the task force, what do we do with the lands that are designated as sort of public space, park and whatnot. And identifying community partners, the third item here of 1.3, the support and assist community engagement with residents, assist in identifying community partners, that's in particular directed to that Mohawk Lake Working Group. And we've got to better establish and better think out what is the relationship? What is it that they're going to do, and what is it they hope to accomplish, and how can that work with this task force? And it's been very confusing. It hasn't been well understood to date what that relationship is and should be. And so the intent here that Councillor Carpenter and Councillor Van Tilburg have put on the table, which is a refinement of what we talked about the task force, is to expand that vision and that horizon of this task force to accomplish some of what I think many of the residents in the community think we're trying to do, which is more than just the Mohawk Greenwich lands. So that's the intent, and that's why I can be a very enthusiastic supporter of this amendment.
Thank you, Mayor. Seeing no further speakers on the amendment, we'll call the vote, please.
Councilor Martin, are you still having difficulties with the iPad?
Yes, Sam, I'll vote in the affirmative.
Thank you. The amendment to the mandate for the Mohawk Lake report is approved unanimously on a recorded vote. Those in favor, Mayor Davis, Councilors Vanderstelt, Sless, Martin, Antosky, Wall, Van Tilburg, Carpenter, McCreary, Utley, and Weaver.
All right, is there any discussion on the motion as amended? Seeing none, we'll call the vote, please.
Item 2 of the Mohawk Lake District Working Group Report 2021-04-12 as amended is approved unanimously on a recorded vote. Those in favor, Mayor Davis, Councilors Vanderstelt, Sless, Martin, Antosky, Wall, Van Tilburg, Carpenter, McCreary, Utley, and Weaver.
All right, the next item we have is 7.1.1 separated. I think that was separated by Councilor Van Tilburg, is that correct?
Yes. Certainly, I have a few questions of staff. The property in question, which was brought into the Heritage Committee sphere in 2017, why was it out originally in 2017? Why was that not naturally in?
Through the chair, Victoria Coates, intermediate planner and long range planning. In response to that question, I think you're referring to why was it not included in the site plan control bylaw? Is that correct?
Well, there was the amendment that, or clause 4 of it, that came out. Let me just see if I can pull it up. My eyes are failing me here. I just can't find the resolution itself from that time frame, but there was it was where the Heritage Committee gets to speak to it. So I guess that is the site plan portion. So
through the chair,
why did that not exist prior to 2017 on that property?
So through the chair, the Heritage Committee has the opportunity to review demolition control applications. So this is how the property was brought before the Heritage Committee when there was a proposal to demolish the building. That application was approved by council to demolish the building. However, at the same time, council saw a need to allow the committee an opportunity to participate in a different way, which would be through a future site plan control application for a new development. So this is separate from the demolition process, and the committee's comments will be focused on a new development as opposed to the demolition of an existing property.
So the Heritage Committee, with regards to properties in these older areas, is there not a way that we would have them comment on any such project like this, not just that property, but any other ones? Prior, like I know we're now allowing them to discuss when it's demolition, but wouldn't it be all site plan approvals in those older districts? Shouldn't that be the realm of a Heritage Committee to have input on?
Through the chair, the Heritage Committee's mandate is really focused on properties that have heritage value, and that value is determined through designation or listing on the Heritage Register. So the Heritage Committee has the opportunity to review developments that are either affect a designated property or a listed property, or that are adjacent to those properties. So the committee regularly reviews heritage impact statements that are submitted to support site plan control applications that affect those heritage properties.
So with regards to the property on East Ave, there are obviously heritage buildings around it, beside it, across from it. They would already be adjacent in that case. Would that not have been natural? Because my understanding is that it was the Heritage Committee. I think it was, this clause was introduced by Dan McCrary, if I recall correctly, in order, after what seemed like a losing battle that the place was going to be demolished, that there was a way to keep the area looking in this realm of what that district looks like.
Through the chair, so there are no designated or listed properties that are actually adjacent to this specific property. It is certainly an older neighborhood, and so at the time, that was the decision that was made to allow the committee to comment through this process.
Thank you. You've now removed the fog from my brain, because I was wondering how this happens. So with a property that gets the attention of the Heritage Committee when it's going to be demolished, probably because it has heritage significance that they try to address, would not the buildings adjacent fall in that same line if they were to be demolished? That they would get the same contact and say, hey, this building next door is going to be demolished, and you have a say. So this is what I find a little bit perplexing, in that I would have expected then the same logic applied to if they address it in demolition, and then council votes whatever will be, that site plan be done the same way. For I would like to see some consistency. In other words, this is a one-off, and now I understand how it got dropped when we redid the new thing, and then I'm happy that you caught it. But what I would like to know is there a way to make that a standard, which I think it should be, so that it's almost like a two-stage mechanism. First is to look at the property for its heritage value, and the second is to deal with how it would look. Because when you take a place like that's on East Ave and you're rebuilding it, you can affect the heritage values of the properties next to them.
Through the chair, so I think that would be sort of a difficult thing to implement. The city has lots of older neighborhoods, and to extend the site plan control bylaw to encompass low density development, anywhere where there's older buildings would certainly require a lot of staff resources to manage the site plan control process, and also be very, in addition to requiring additional input from the Heritage Committee, which already has, a mandate to look specifically at heritage properties.
Okay, thank you. But we have done that in this case for that building.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
All right, seeing no further speakers, I will call the vote.
My iPad's locked up again. I vote in the affirmative.
Thank you. Item 7.1.1, technical amendment to site plan control bylaw number 90-2018 to add 43 East Avenue as a property subject to site plan control is approved unanimously on a recorded vote. Those in favor, Mayor Davis, Councilors Vandersteldt, Celeste, Martin, Antosky, Wall, Van Tilburg, Carpenter, McCurry, Utley, and Weaver.
Thank you. That brings us to resolutions. 8.1 noise bylaw amendment. Councilor Van Tilburg, would you please move 8.1?
Wow, we're here already. Moved by myself, seconded by Councilor Celeste. Whereas excessive noise has the effect of interfering with the use and enjoyment of an individual's property, and whereas the Municipal Act allows municipalities to pass bylaws to regulate with respect to noise, vibration, odor, dust, outdoor illumination, including indoor lighting that can be seen outdoors, and prohibit the matters described in Clause A unless a permit is obtained from the municipality for those matters, and may impose conditions for obtaining and continuing to hold and renewing the permit, including requiring the submission of plans. And whereas Section 10.2 of the Municipal Act permits a municipality to pass bylaws respecting the economic, social, environmental well-being of the municipality, the health, safety, and well-being of persons, and protection of persons and property. And whereas the city wishes to ensure that the use of lands within the city has minimal adverse impact on the quiet enjoyment of surrounding lands. Now therefore be it resolved, A, that staff be directed to amend the noise bylaw to include the prohibition of the noise or the sound made or created by any radio, phonograph, public address system, sound equipment, loudspeaker, musical instrument, and or other sound producing equipment when the equipment is played or operated in such a manner that the sound or noise made or created thereby unreasonably disturbs the peace, comfort, repose of any person in a dwelling, house, or police officer acting in accordance with their duties under the Police Services Act, or successor, and that the same be prohibited at all times. And B, that staff be directed to place the amended bylaw on the bylaw listing for consideration by council. And if I could briefly speak to that, this bylaw is to bring some peace into some households that are affected probably more during this time than they've ever been. COVID has forced people to work from their homes, to learn from their homes, to be in their homes far more often than they may have realized that they were when they're in the past. And loud noise and disturbances that are ongoing or like of a nuisance can interfere with their well-being of not only their enjoyment of their home and their yards, but in their productivity of work. So in the last couple of years, well, pretty much since the start of COVID and a bit before that, been plagued a little bit by some bad actors out there who believe that they should do things because they can. And unfortunately for our bylaw officers and the police, there has been no recourse. And that has really come to a head for a number of constituents who now have to deal with trying to do Zoom meetings and what have you with incredibly loud noise or music being played in the background. So it's trying to bring peace to the neighborhood. It's not to regulate everybody from you can't play your music. It's really to get after the chronic bad actor out there that just doesn't want to show any respect to their neighbors. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Van Tilburg. Next, I have Councilor Utley. I almost did it the opposite way this time.
Thank you, Madam Chair. You just didn't get me mixed up. I fully support this amendment, and thank Councilor Van Tilburg for adding a lot more definition to an ongoing problem that we have in our community and other communities. The challenge is always how do we measure the noise and how do we enforce the people that create the problem. And I would hope that this added definition will provide our bylaw officers and police officers with that definition in which to make charges if necessary and issue fines in extreme cases. So thank you, Councilor Van Tilburg.
Thank you, Councilor Utley. Councilor Vanderstel.
Thank you, Chair Antosky. Thank you to both the mover and the seconder. This is well timed and well thought out. It's not always necessarily the volume, but it's the type of music that is sometimes played. I think both Councillor Weaver and myself have received calls about distressed employees who are working from their home work environment, trying to manage a number of different things at the same time and not being able to conduct a professional meeting inside of their own home based on the volume and the content of the music that is being played. So many of them called me and expressed their frustration about it, and expressed the frustration about not having the means by which they can change that kind of offensive behavior or offensive language. So I applaud these efforts. They make a lot of sense. I think Councilor Van Tilburg hit the nail on the head. So many more people are working from home. So many more of our people are working from home. And of all the embarrassing things that have happened during a Zoom meeting, listening to, or not having a choice but to listen to and broadcast language that is not only unparliamentary but extremely unprofessional is extremely frustrating for employees, because they have no recourse but to find a way to deaden the sound. So I support this 100%. I look forward to watching it be effective in this now more professional / personal world that we live in from home. So thank you very much, both councillors.
Councillor Wall.
Thank you, Chair Antosky. And might I add, you're doing a spectacular job this evening in the chair. Congratulations. So I'm more than willing to support this here tonight because I believe in it, and I do believe it has merit, but I have concerns, and I have a feeling that a lot of those concerns are going to come up in the emails and phone calls we're going to receive between when this potentially gets approved tonight and when this comes back to council. So I will be prepared to probably separate this at council to have a couple of questions answered. I never in a million years would have realized how many calls I would get from people I represent regarding noise. It just seems like respect for fellow human beings is sadly sometimes at an all-time low. And when I get a call from a family who is just trying to enjoy their day in their house and their neighbor is just blasting music that's full of profanity and vulgar acts and is just rattling their home, like, I get it. You know, if I was the dad in that scenario and I knocked on my neighbor's door and I was like, hey dude, could you just like turn down your music? Like, trying to like hang out with my daughter, could you stop? And that person just slams the door in the face, like, yeah, I'm gonna go to Facebook and post about my neighbor, or I'm gonna call the city and say, what are you gonna do about my neighbor? So I get it. If we don't have a mechanism in place to protect the people that we represent from being, you know, not being able to have peaceful possession of their own personal space, then I mean, there will be people who breach that, you know, sanctuary of home. But at the same time, you know, a 15-year-old kid who wants to do drum lessons in his garage has every right to be able to practice his drum lessons, and the neighbor shouldn't be able to call the cops on him. And I know that that's not the intent of this motion. But there are people out there on the opposite side of the coin who just want to stand in the way from people having fun and listening to music, and who will abuse this bylaw if it gets written. So that's where I know we're going to get flack if something like this gets passed. So I'm torn, because again, I never in a million years would have realized how many calls I would get from people that I represent who have concerns about noise from their neighbors. And I feel that it is our responsibility to do something. So again, in its current state, I'm more than willing to support it, but I have concerns that I will bring up once I've had time to kind of get more feedback from the people I represent to hear what those concerns are. Quickly, I'm wondering who from staff is here to talk. Is there someone from bylaw?
Yes, I believe Gary Anderson's here.
Gary, thank you. If you don't mind, it's a quick moment, please. For anybody who's listening or watching, or our media partners specifically, could you just please elaborate on our current bylaw strategy in the event that someone is in infraction of a bylaw? We don't just run out and give them a ticket, right? We're not just handing out tickets willy-nilly to every single little bylaw infraction. What's the process?
Thank you, Council Wall. Through the chair, to answer your inquiry, our policy and practice in bylaw enforcement is somewhat steadfast and commonplace in most Ontario municipalities. Is we are reactive to complaints as we receive them, And our first role is to educate, always has been, to educate the public on what the rules and regulations are, and to enhance that education with enforcement when deemed necessary. And certainly there's opportunities where that's necessary when the repeat issues happen, that we do extend that enhanced enforcement measure. But our first approach is to educate first. Bylaw is not about being punitive until absolutely necessary.
Hey,
So in this
Councillor
exa-
Wall,
Oh.
sorry, Councillor Wall, you're out of time. If you want to go
Nope.
back in the queue again, I'd appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you, Gary.
Councillor McCreary.
Well, thank you, Madam Chair. I'll be supporting this. The councillor was kind enough to discuss this with me yesterday briefly on the phone, and I'm fully supportive of it. Councillor Martin, I don't get a lot of these complaints in our ward, knock wood, but I do understand that it is a bit of a nuisance in some parts of the city. And I got to say it's there's so many ways in which people nowadays are demonstrating their ego, their selfishness, and their lack of concern for other people. And we as a council have more than come to realize that in the last 14 months that we've been sitting around this table. It's just got to stop. I think back to the issue that Councillor Martin and I had a number of years ago, where an individual thought it was a great thing to stroke his ego by putting on a Christmas display worthy of a Christmas Vacation. And the Griswolds would have been extremely jealous of this individual playing music over the radio and turning the whole street into a campground and picnic area. And at the time, we brought a resolution to cure that aspect of our shortcomings. We did that, and the neighborhood was very grateful. And I'm sure that the neighborhoods that are surrounding some of these other nuisances are going to be extremely grateful for the councillor's action in this respect. And I should say that Councillor Martin and I have an initiative coming forward, hopefully next month, once we've vetted the resolution, that's going to look at a targeted campaign against vehicles that are sporting those sporty mufflers, aftermarket mufflers. And that also is a bit of a plague on this community, especially to our constituents in the vicinity of King George Road and a mile on either side that listen to these mufflers generally after hours. So congrats, Councillor. I'll be supportive.
Thank you, Councillor McCreary. Councillor Van Tilburg.
Yes, I just want to briefly touch upon some of the things that Councillor Wall mentioned, and probably will come up with more questions in a couple of weeks, because those reservations are the same ones that I have. But we're not reinventing the wheel here. I had, in frustration and trying to deal with some of the issues, I started looking around, and I can come across Guelph, which had passed a similar one well over a year ago, which is a 24-hour based bylaw. And I contacted them to ask them, how is it going? Is it abused? Is it effective? Like, is this working? And they said it works exactly the same way during the day as in the night, and it's calmed the neighborhoods down. And I'm thinking in a university town, in a very progressive city that's done that beforehand, and they've had good success with it. I was confident enough to start discussing with Mr. Anderson and legal department on bringing one tailored to suit Brantford and fit within our bylaws. And I appreciate them, because you full well know that I didn't write these words. Thank you.
Councillor Carpenter.
Yes, I'll be supporting this wholeheartedly, and congratulations to Councillor Brian Van Tilburg for the work he's done in this. We spent a long time doing the previous noise bylaw. It didn't solve all the problems, and this will put the cap on it and make it better, of course. And looking at Guelph, which is a very progressive community, and looking at kind of some of their bylaws and things they're doing is a good idea. The argument about the guy playing drums and the kid playing drums in his garage, nothing wrong with it, that person playing drums in the garage, but if they open the garage door while they're doing it and leave the garage door open, that's a very different story for the neighborhood. So as Gary has said, we try to educate first, and then we legislate. So it works very well, that process, and Gary's been very successful with that. So I don't have any too many concerns. It'll be just common sense is what we need to put here. Thank you.
All right, seeing no further speakers, I'll call the vote on the resolution, please.
Item 8.1 noise bylaw amendment is approved unanimously on a recorded vote. Those in favor, Mayor Davis, Councilors Vandersteldt, Sless, Martin, Antosky, Wall, Van Tilburg, Carpenter, McCreary, Utley, and Weaver.
Thank you. Next, we have 8.2 COVID-19 support system by Councilor Wall. This has not been before committee before with a notice of motion, so it will require a motion to waive the rules. So Councilor Wall, if you can move your motion to waive, please.
Excellent. Forgive me for not completely understanding the process here. Do I just ask to waive the rules or do I have to read the whole motion?
You read the whole thing, please.
Okay, sorry. COVID-19 support system. Moved by myself and seconded by Mayor Davis. Motion to waive the rules that section 15.11.5 of the City of Brantford procedural bylaw be waived in order to introduce the following resolution without prior notice of motion. Whereas the COVID-19 global pandemic has caused severe mental, physical, spiritual, and financial harm to millions worldwide, and whereas thousands of citizens of Brantford are facing unprecedented hardships related to the COVID-19 global pandemic, and whereas accessible information regarding support, resources, and verified, comprehensible, accurate, up-to-date information is disjointed, and whereas the following 3 paragraphs are direct quotes from the City of Brantford mission, vision, value statement, and whereas the City of Brantford is committed to responsible leadership through sound fiscal management and the delivery of quality programs and services for the citizens of Brantford, and whereas the City of Brantford is committing to putting citizens first by providing excellent service and exceptional experiences, by focusing on our citizens and our employees are engaged in challenging and meaningful work that enables the people of our community to thrive and prosper. And whereas the City of Brantford is proactive in our thinking and our actions, introducing new ideas and finding innovative ways to bring them to life, we support and nurture new solutions that drive progress. And whereas too many may need mental, physical, spiritual, and financial help, but may not know where to go or where to turn. Now, therefore, be it resolved. A, that staff be directed to collect and promote extensively accessible, understandable, accurate information of programs, services, and funding related to mental, physical, spiritual, and financial well-being during the City of Brantford state of emergency. And B, that staff be directed to work with the federal and provincial government, local nonprofit associations and organizations, local businesses, guilds, unions, boards, community members, and others to brainstorm new ideas and innovative ways to bring them to life. And C, that staff be directed to coordinate with Neighbors Helping Neighbors campaign, neighborhood associations, and other key partners in collecting and distributing this information. And D, that staff be directed to facilitate 4 themed digital public roundtable symposiums with the following themes: mental, physical, spiritual, and financial recovery, in coordination with mental health professionals, doctors, business owners, members of council, and interested qualified professionals, whereby members of the public can share challenges, ideas, potential solutions, and pose questions that will be compiled into 4 reports to be presented to council and used to lobby specific support and resources from the provincial and federal government for local mental, physical, spiritual, and financial recovery from the COVID-19 worldwide pandemic. And E, that the Council of the Corporation of the City of Brantford, on behalf of its citizens, demand that the provincial and federal government prioritize the mental, physical, spiritual, and financial well-being of the citizens of this country by enhancing its cooperation, communication, and accountability to municipal governments across the country.
All right, do we have any discussion on the motion to waive the rules? Councillor Carpenter.
Could I get an explanation of why the urgency of this matter coming before now without having a notice of motion?
I can, I'll go to Councilor Wall if you'd like to respond to that.
I don't want to speak for other members of council, but I have been inundated with phone calls and being stopped wherever I go or being tagged on social media that people want to know exactly what this city is doing to support members of our community when it comes to the physical, mental, spiritual, or financial well-being. And I know that that information is out there somewhere, but that information should be collected and put into one place where it's easy to go for people to have, and that resource should exist yesterday. And that's something that this motion specifically asks for. And the sooner we can get the work, the sooner we can get help to people who need help.
Okay, you're fine, Councilor Carpenter? Yeah. Okay, all right, Mayor Davis.
Yeah, on that particular issue, Councilor Wall is quite right. And the reason why I'm seconding not only the motion to waive, but the underlying motion is exactly what Councilor Wall talked about. And, you know, it's a real concern. I mean, to date, for example, much of my efforts and the efforts of this council have been focused on protecting people, you know, physically, protecting them from COVID, working in the health.
Sorry, Mayor, can we talk specifically to the needs? Sorry.
Fair enough. So, but there is, as we've seen with the lockdown weariness, right, a real need to do more than that and focus on this part, which hasn't been a large component of what we've done. So, but the urgency is clear with this lockdown, the third lockdown, the third wave. A lot of people are hurting, and so if we wait to go through the normal process, you know, we're losing 5 or 6 weeks getting a head start on this and getting ahead of it. So that's why.
All right, thank you. Seeing no further speakers, we'll call the vote. We need 2/3 for this to move forward.
Councilor Martin, would you like to give a verbal?
Yeah, I'll be voting negative.
Thank you. Motion to waive the rules is carried on a recorded vote of 10-1 with the required 2/3. Those in favor, Mayor Davis, Councilors Vanderstelt, Sless, Antosky, Wall, Van Tilburg, Carpenter, McCreary, Utley, and Weaver. Those against, Councilor Martin.
Okay, so discussion on the resolution as presented. I've got Councilor Wall, please.
Awesome. Okay, thank you. First, I want to say thank you to members of the council for putting this on the table, because this is very important to me and the people that we represent, and I'm thankful that you're hearing me out on this. Second, I want to thank Mayor Davis for being an ear and for his help in creating and making this what it is, and for directing me to speak with Brian Hutchings, our CAO, and to ensure this is something that staff are capable of doing, which then directed me to Aaron Wallace and Marlene, and they were invaluable in making sure that this is something that we're able to do today. I just want to summarize, because I said a tremendous amount of words. I have 3 very actionable items that I am hoping that this resolution will bring forward should it pass at council at the end of the month or pass here today. The first actionable item is to take the information that is out there, because there are people working tirelessly behind the scenes to provide support for physical, mental, spiritual, and financial well-being of people during COVID-19. But that information is in a million different places. And when people come to me as a municipal representative, as a leader, as their counselor, as somebody they look to for help, I want to be able to say, you know what? I hear what you're saying. Here's where you go to get help. And our Neighbors Helping Neighbors campaign has showed me that our communications department and our staff have the ability to build a repository and a directory, a one-stop shop of where to go when you need help. Does the city do all of those things? Absolutely not. But the people we know and the connections that we have and the resources that we have available, we can easily, maybe not easily, but we can definitely put them into one spot so that we can direct people where they can go to get help, resources, or support. The second actionable item is for us to host a public information session or a roundtable discussion based upon mental health, physical health, spiritual health, and financial health and recovery, where members of this community can come out and have their voice heard, whether they have an idea of ways we can be doing this better, whether they have a particular story that they want to share about how they've been infected by the result, the impact of COVID-19. People have made it loud and clear that they want to have their voice heard. And while they could call me or any other member of this council or call City Hall, we can act as a microphone to amplify the voices of the people who've been impacted by COVID-19 and use that information in reports that we can then use to lobby the other levels of government and anybody who will listen, so we can get help that is laser focused, specific to the people who need help most. And then the third part of my motion is to simply say to the other levels of government, the province and the federal government, please give us the tools and the funding and the resources we need to help people. Because a lot of this is getting downloaded onto the municipality, and we don't have the ability to run a deficit. We don't have the ability to raise people's taxes 20% to be able to do all the things that we need to do. And all I'm asking for is for better communication and more resources, and to prioritize the mental, physical, spiritual, and financial well-being of the members of this community. There's too many questions, not enough answers. I want this to be a tool that the members of this community can feel like their voice is being heard loud and clear. Thank you.
Perfect timing, and my apologies. I neglected to get the actual resolution moved and seconded on the floor. So Councillor Wall, I assume you're moving it. Is your seconder still the mayor? Thank you. Thank you. Sorry about that, folks. All right. We've got a bunch of councillors in line here. We've got Councillor Utley next, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Through you to staff, how much of this are we already doing? And how well or bad is information being coordinated by different departments and agencies to get the answers to our community members that need it? And then lastly, is there a cost to this in terms of staff time and budget? So if I could get some, I think there's about 3 questions in there somewhere. Hi, Aaron.
Hi, Councillor. Through the chair, Aaron Wallace, Director of Community Programs. So to the last of your questions, we wouldn't anticipate needing any additional budget or resources for a project like this. In terms of the first question in regards to how well information is being collected and distributed, it's probably a bit of a mixed bag, honestly. I think that the municipality does a fairly good job of putting its programs front and center on its website. We of course have a contact center where folks can call in and get some of that information. Within the community at large, we do have an agency called Contact Brant, which does a good job of collecting and disseminating information about particularly social programs. I think the challenge within kind of the COVID environment is that there's lots of new programs being launched. Some of them don't have overly familiar names. They're being offered by different levels of government within different ministries. So I think the overall answer, it is probably confusing for someone to find the program or service that could benefit them. Although I think agencies in the municipality are doing good work centralizing and distributing. I just think there's a lot happening right now where folks may have a tough time navigating to the right program for them.
Thank you, Aaron. I'm very familiar with Contact Brand, so pretty good agency. Thank you.
Thank you. Mayor Davis, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So first of all, I want to commend Councillor Wall on 2 points. One, being really practical about it. We did talk about it on the weekend, and his original approach was kind of a task force, and then we discussed that and how long that would take, and we're trying to help people immediately, very shortly, and how Councillor Wall then worked with staff to make sure that it's something that could be done within the current budget and the current staffing that we have in place. And then, so I got to tell you, I was very impressed with how he worked through it and to get staff behind it and to help him. And I think it also speaks to what I just spoke about previously, which is, much of my direction, that of this council, has just been really to deal with the kind of the physical realities of COVID, protecting people, working with the health unit, vaccination programs, and taking care of people's, let's call it physical health, and protect them from COVID. And then, of course, there's the Economic Recovery Task Force, which is really kind of focusing on, jobs and recovering economically. And, through all of that, and having gone through extended lockdowns and people weary with these lockdowns, and it really starting to affect people more than just physically and mentally and spiritually. And who is it on our council that saw that and moved forward? Councillor Wall. And I think it speaks to the finest elements of Councillor Wall, his genuine concern for his fellow residents, and identifying when it is that a need is there that's not being addressed. And I think it speaks to the finest in Councillor Wall. And I'm sure hopefully this council will support this, because we've heard from staff. This is actually, I heard from them earlier today. This does kind of coincide with some of what Marlene and Aaron is working on in respect to, helping residents deal with the impact of COVID, and not just on their economic livelihood, but also in their quality of life. This is what this is really talking about. So very happy to support it, and a good initiative. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Councilor Van Tilburg.
I think this is very timely heading into the third lockdown, and I don't think anybody believed we would be here a year ago in a similar spot. I think that the task force that was created last year was very effective, and this is almost like a continuation of that, but with a different, and I would say probably a more expedient desired resolution. My questions are in the things that we see, and this is probably what's inspired Councillor Wall, is what we've been reading, seeing, and visually experiencing within our community. Certain groups are definitely being more detrimentally economically affected by the way the lockdowns are implemented. I believe that small businesses taking the heaviest hits, and there's probably other sectors that I'm not that familiar with, but certainly when you look around and you see what's going there. Now, I know we used to have industrial directories. We used to say how many factories are here, how many have closed. I know that we keep good tracks on employment numbers. Do we have a tracking mechanism on small business? The numbers that we've had, the numbers that have been hanging on in the last year, and quite frankly, I know that there are still some hanging on right now, and they're in a very precarious spot. That's one of the things I would like some answers to, if we can. And if we have them tonight, wonderful. But that's something I'd be looking forward to getting, so that we can find ways to help. The other portion that I hear, and I'm not as well versed in it, is regards to landlords with rents not being paid, and how to deal with this. If they have the mechanisms that they're being able to sustain their way through this, because obviously the tenants are hurting, and they're not being able to sustain paying their rents. And I know that there's been programs, and I don't know how long these programs come, they go, whether they have expired or not expired. So if I could, on just those two issues alone, and this is the thing that I think that's great about this resolution, the way that I've asked those questions is exactly what Councilor Wall is asking other people to engage in order to provide that forum. We will learn so much from it. So with that, I'd like to end my question, and if there's an answer, any kind of answer from staff, I'm all ears.
Aaron?
Yeah, through the chair, with your permission, I'll take a shot at the second question. I don't know if any of my colleagues from economic development are on the line who can speak to small business.
I see Brian also on the line. So
okay,
go
I'll
ahead,
stand
Aaron.
down.
So for the
Try
first
to go
question,
first, Councilor, on the landlord tenant issue.
go
Yeah.
Go ahead, Aaron, and then we'll get Ryan. Go ahead. Sorry, folks.
Okay. So in terms of rent going unpaid, it's certainly something that we're keeping an eye on. It's something that the province is putting some money towards from the tenant's perspective. One of the challenges we're aware of as a housing provider ourselves is that there have been slowdowns at the landlord and tenant board, which has slowed down some of those resolution processes and repayment plans and that type of thing. But I would say if landlords are aware of tenants that are not able to pay but wish to and can't because of economic circumstances, I would encourage them to call social services. With the social services relief funding, we have implemented some rent bank work and some rent relief work. So if there's somebody who can't pay their rent because of economic circumstances, I would encourage them to call and get some information. We may be able to support them. In terms of the landlord themselves, obviously they could get resources from the community legal clinic if they're not exactly sure how to proceed, and then ultimately they would have the option to pursue to the continue on to the board if they needed a resolution there. But from the client and tenant perspective, certainly if landlords are finding themselves or members of the community are finding that that's a situation people are in, certainly give us a call, and then there may be programs we can support them with.
Thank you, Aaron. Mr. Hutchings.
Thank you, you, Madam Chair. To Councilor Van Tilburg, it's a long wait to tell you that I'll have to come back with information. Councilor Van Tilburg, economic development does track these things. I don't have that at the ready, those numbers. We can provide a memo to you on your question, though. I can get that from economic development.
Thank you. First time speaker, Councilor Vanderstel.
Thank you, Madam Chair. You got it right off that bat. Good. I support this 100%. And I'll tell you why. If we can't measure it, we can't manage it. There are populations outside of the knowledge of our people that we have on the screen right now who are suffering from the ill effects of COVID and all of the restrictions related that we haven't dreamt of, we haven't thought of, we haven't talked about with anybody. And I think it's wise that we know where our unmet needs are within the community. They're growing as we speak tonight. And by doing a bit of a deep dive into where those needs are and then showing in multiple reports how they're evolving or devolving as the case may be, we can try, and I hope we are successful in finding the resources and funding to meet those needs. As the body of government closest to those types of needs in municipal government. This is, from my perspective, it has a potential of being precedent setting, not just in Brantford, but other areas, other locales as well. It will be a number of years before we fully understand and recognize and realize the ramifications of what we've just gone through. It's going to affect everybody. And I think the more we know about those effects, the better we can treat them. So I applaud this effort, and I stand behind it, and I look forward to making sure we can meet the needs that we don't know about yet. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wall.
I'm thankful for this second opportunity. I just had a little bit of myself there earlier, and thank you for indulging me. I want to just make sure that I acknowledge that there are just these incredible human beings out there right now who are working tirelessly and expending every effort that they have to try to get us through this and to try to provide the support and resources and help that people need. And this motion is intended to help consolidate the information that is out there, and then to make sure that we are helping to deliver that information to the people who need it. I just want to please make sure that this is intended to be what it is, and that is a call out to industry professionals, those who are mental health professionals, doctors and associations and organizations that specifically deal with mental health. Please take part in this and ensure that, if you have a support or a service or an idea or a solution that can be heard, use this. For those in the physical health world, we're talking gym owners, we're talking coaches, we're talking doctors. If you believe that you have a solution or idea or a practical way that we can help people recover from the effects, please participate in this. Spiritually, the faith-based leaders that are out there, please reach out to us. Let people know that you are there to hear them and use us as a way to connect with the people you want to connect with. And lastly, financially, Chamber of Commerce, BIAs, business owners, you've been impacted in ways that many people will never understand, and the challenges that are affecting you and your businesses are unique. Please use us as a conduit to have your voice heard so that the challenges that you are facing can be documented and used to get you the help that you need. Schools are not really my forte. We have a trustee system for that and school boards and stuff, but I know that teachers have this incredible relationship with moms and dads and aunts and uncles and caregivers, and with the students and the children that they teach. Please use this as a conduit and a microphone so that you can have your specific challenges and concerns heard, and for us to use that information to lobby and get you the help that you need. The last thing I'll say on this is that this was always intended to be 3 action items that complemented one another. The first item is to consolidate the resources and help that's available. The second is to identify the gaps. And the third item is to fill those gaps. This has been hard on so many people, and all I want to do is be a conduit so people can get the help that they need. So thank you so much for everybody who's messaged me and commented and who will message and comment. And thank you so much to this council for hearing this motion and for all the kind things that you've said.
Thank you, Councillor Wall. Councillor Carpenter, please.
Thank you. To staff, probably Mr. Wallace. Can you tell me how you're going to organize the roundtable symposium on mental, spiritual, and physical and financial roundtables? How are you going to put these roundtables together, and how soon are you going to report back to us on how this is going to work?
Yeah, through the chair, I don't have a lot of details on it yet. I would suspect that there probably some virtual format and it probably accompanied by some survey for folks that aren't able to participate, virtually or don't feel comfortable participating in a group. But I do envision something like a virtual town hall with a secondary component to collect additional information. We would hope to later in the spring to have those things planned and executed, probably with a report back to council on what was identified and a bit of a service gap mapping, probably later in the summer or fall, so probably around September, if that was agreeable to committee.
Okay, so you don't need any kind of amendment to make for timelines. You'll just by the September, you'll have this put together and tell us where we fit in and how we play a role.
Yeah, through the chair, certainly.
Okay, thank you.
Good. Okay, thank you. No further speakers. We can call the vote on this.
Item 8.2, COVID-19 support system is approved unanimously on recorded vote. Those in favor, Mayor Davis, Councillors Vanderstelt, Sless, Martin, Antosky, Wall, Van Tilburg, Carpenter, McCreary, Utley, and Weaver.
Next, we have item 8.3, Customer Code of Conduct. Councillor Vanderstelt, would you please move your motion to waive the rules?
Absolutely. Thank you, Madam Chair. I move by myself, seconded by my ward mate, Councillor Weaver. Motion to waive the rules that section 15.11.5 of the City of Brantford procedural bylaw be waived in order to introduce the following resolution without prior notice of motion. Whereas the Corporation of the City of Brantford, the city, has through corporate policy 030 respectful workplace policy made a commitment to fostering a culture and providing a working environment in which the safety, health, and wellness of city employees is respected and protected. And whereas the city has adopted various other policies, standards, and codes to ensure that the city's workplace is free from harassment, discrimination, bullying, abuses of power, and other undesirable behaviors, which policy standards and codes include an employee code of conduct, a work security standard, and respectful workplace program. And whereas in 2020, the City Council adopted a new robust code of conduct for members of council of the Corporation of the City of Brantford and its local boards, signaling council's commitment to ensuring respect in the workplace, among other things. And, oh, there's an and missing. And whereas the city currently has in place an incident reporting tool by which city employees, volunteers, and contractors may report incidents of behavior that fall outside of the city's respectful workplace standards or are otherwise contrary to law. And whereas employees, volunteers, and contractors of the city have and continue to be subjected to harassment, bullying, discrimination, and other undesirable and unwanted behaviors by customers, members of the public, and others who attend or who are part of the city workplace. And whereas the City Council strongly opposes such undesirable behavior and is committed to ensuring that all members of the city's workplace experience a work environment in which they are treated with dignity and respect. And whereas, in order to facilitate such an environment, Council desires to provide city employees, volunteers, and contractors with additional tools in order to refuse service to people who violate the city's various workplace standards. Now, therefore, the Council of the Corporation of the City of Brantford hereby resolves as follows: A, that staff be directed to promote the existing incident reporting tool as a mechanism by which city employees, volunteers, and contractors may report incidents of behavior that violate the city's workplace standards or are otherwise contrary to applicable law, such as Human Rights Code, Occupational Health and Safety Act, and the Canadian Criminal Code, and to ensure, to the greatest extent possible, the confidentiality of those who report such incidents through the incident reporting tool. And B, that staff be directed to bring forward a report to Council summarizing all incidents of behaviors that violate the city's various policy, codes of conduct, and standards relating to workplace conduct arising from interactions with members of the public from December 2019 to present, whether reported through the incident reporting tool or otherwise known to management. Key point there. And to include in the report to Council a chronological list of all undesirable behavior directed at city employees, volunteers, or contractors during this time frame, as well as any current or pending litigation relating to such behavior, and the names of the offended parties if known. And C, that staff be directed to invite comment and reporting on all incidents of undesirable behavior within the above noted time frame from the city's subsidiary corporations, as well the independent boards or other like organizations who provide services within the city of Brantford on behalf of the city, such as, and without limitation, the Library Board, Police Services Board, Downtown Business Improvement Area Board, and the Brantford Local Housing Corporation. And D, that staff be directed to draft a customer code of conduct which explains and identifies the standard of behavior and decorum which is required of members of the public when they interact with city employees, volunteers, contractors, or make comment on city forums about city employees, volunteers, or contractors, or the services they provide, and to establish procedures necessary for staff to prevent, diffuse, and report any behavior and remove any comment which violates the city standards as set out in the new customer code of conduct. And E, that staff be directed to present the new customer code of conduct to Council for the appropriate subcommittee for public debate and consideration in Q3 of 2021, and to ensure that the draft customer code of conduct is circulated to the senior management team, applicable unions, associations, and the joint health and safety committees for review and comment prior to presentation to Council.
Thank you. Do we have any comments regarding specifically the waiving of the rules? Councilor Carpenter.
Yeah, same question. Why is a priority to do this tonight and not notice a motion following the proper procedure? Is there a hurry, or is there certain incidents, or I'm just trying to understand why we're waiving the rules?
Councilor Van der Stelk, can you respond to that?
Both privately, Chair Antosky, and in a number of different types of settings, Our staff are being mistreated, and we need to move on this. We need to stop that culture.
Thank you. Seeing no other speakers, we will call the vote on the motion to waive the rules, which requires a 2/3 vote.
Motion to waive the rules is carried with the required 2/3 vote. Those in favor, Mayor Davis, Councillors Vanderstelt, Sless, Martin, Antosky, Wall, Van Tilburg, McCreary, Utley, and Weaver. Those against, Councillor Carpenter.
All right, thank you. I need a mover and a seconder to get this on the floor, please. Moved by Councillor Vanderstelt and seconded by Councillor Weaver. And do we have any speakers? I've got Councillor Carpenter first.
Yes, if someone from legal is still there, has the legal department seen this, and we have get some information back about how enforceable these things are and at what level?
Through the chair, Heidi DeVries, General Manager, People, Legislative Service and Planning, and also your current city solicitor. Yes, in fact, the legal department has reviewed this, and I assisted with some of the language to ensure that we could bring this forward in a manner that protected the privacy of the individuals involved, and also reported into council the various incidents that were known to management and reported. This is actually a requirement in part under the Occupational Health and Safety Act. And so it's something that we do have in place. It's just not something we typically report into council. But if council is interested in some of this data, it's something that we could bring forward. It would come forward in a confidential manner.
So we already do this, but now this is just going to be a report to council. Is that what you're saying?
So through the chair, aspects of this we have in place. So we have an incident. It's a multifaceted motion. So there's a request for information with respect to incidents reported through our reporting tool that we currently have in place. There's another aspect requiring staff to bring forward a draft code of conduct for consideration by council. We have respectful workplace standards in the city, but we do not have anything so robust as a code of conduct that we could point to say, these are the very clear standards we have for interacting with people in our workplace. I mean, we have those housed in a number of different areas, but this is asking us to consolidate that in a similar manner that we did with the councillor code of conduct, and we are currently doing with our employee code of conduct.
Okay, the only caveat would be we wouldn't be limiting them from, we wouldn't be taking away their free speech at any point of what their opinions are publicly.
So through the chair, the purpose of this, it's a point well taken. The purpose of this is to ensure that whatever the forum, and we are working in mostly a virtual forum these days, that the same respectful standards we require in our physical work environments are applied to all of those forums. And as we are online, we would reserve the right to offend those standards. So it's at law, they just have to be justified.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Carpenter. Councillor Utley.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I can understand that people are frustrated, they're angry, and some have a sense of hopelessness as this COVID pandemic drags on. And we're a lot worse off now than we were a year ago. And I think we were all, me included, looking forward to a nice spring and summer where we could get outside and spend some time with family and friends. So that's not happening. It's not happening right across Ontario. But that does not entitle people to take out their frustrations on each other and especially our staff. And I've heard incidences where our staff have been sworn at and brought to tears. And having heard those stories, I don't think we can wait till Q3. We've got to do something now to protect our staff. If our staff are being talked to like that, treated like that, then we should refuse service. And I think we need, that's one of the tools staff need to get the message across that that sort of behavior and language will not be tolerated in our city. We're responsible for that as a council, to make sure that our staff have a safe and respectful workplace. So I'm fully in support of this. I just wish it was coming back to us a lot sooner than Q3. But I want to thank Councillor Van der Stelp for bringing this forward. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Utley. Councillor Van Tilburg.
Yes, a lot of, I don't know what the words are for it, but it's a gratuitous negative approach used. And it's so flippant because social media is so easy to allow it to happen. But there's also cases where staff are engaging in with the community that are problematic and can be hostile situations. And, you know, health and safety of our employees is utmost. So when I think of trying to remove an encampment and all these other things that happen, or having bad actors, you know, at our facilities that are giving staff an unreasonably hard time, and we do have mechanisms to deal with that. And I understand the move to deny services, and I'm just trying to grasp denying service if you see something online. My other point would be, my other question, not a point, because it's new ground. What level of control do we have on that? Like to make a Facebook report, or is it just that we say, oh, we've seen this and you're no longer allowed access to such a thing? Is that the way it's going to be handled? Because I don't believe, I would, not that I don't believe, I would like to know what laws exist, because this is a really, it's always been there, but a very fast growing phenomena that I think all of us and staff and everyone are running into on a regular basis.
Go ahead, Heidi.
So through you, Chair, and I understand my internet has been unstable today, so I may have been slurring my last statement to Councillor Carpenter's point. So I just wanted to clarify, and hopefully this will come through. I am fine, by the way, and there are serious considerations when it comes to freedoms like freedom of expression. We have been here before with you as a council. You have heard from me on this topic on our social media policies embedded in the Councillor Code of Conduct. I cannot predetermine what will go into this customer code of conduct, but I can tell you it will be vetted by the legal department and senior management, and it will keep all of these things in mind. As a government, you know, ensuring freedom of speech and freedom of expression is a high priority. I know it has been for this council. We have had these conversations in public, and that's a good thing. But this code will essentially be a tool to enable staff to refuse service or remove comments on city forums that cross that line. So we're getting into that sort of defamatory or derogatory or racist or other statements that this council has already stood against. So
this is where I'm hitting at. We already have that control. We actually have to direct that dignity to happen, to remove derogatory, defamatory comments. We don't have a mechanism for that? We're saying, hey, that's pretty disgraceful. We need to pull it if it's on our own site.
So through the chair, what this would do is we do have statements of this nature on some of our forums. This would basically create one comprehensive code that staff could turn to in case they are accused of subjectively removing comments.
Okay,
this creates an objective
now I got
standard.
you. Now I understand. And my other thing, when these things come up and become before us and there's staff members involved, I'm assuming any interactions with the problem will be done in camera as we're dealing with personal staff issues encountered in the workplace. Would that be correct?
So through the chair, it would be the intent for the reporting back on known incidents to be brought in camera. And we would have to turn our minds to the confidentiality that applies to those situations when staff report incidents. So there is a standard of confidentiality there So that will be done through the legal department and the human resources department, keeping those things.
Thank you. I've got that.
Okay, thank you, Councilor Van Tilburg. Next, I have Councilor McCreary.
Madam Chair, thank you. And let me reiterate what an excellent job you're doing this evening. As an employer of choice and an employer specifically in the province of Ontario, we have certain responsibilities to our staff to protect them from harassment, to protect them from sexual harassment, to protect them from workplace violence. That's our mandate. And as councillors, we're at the top of the corporate food chain here. And I'm pleased to see Councillor Vanderstilt, Councillor Weaver have introduced this evening. So it's our responsibility to protect our folks from this type of activity. And I know anecdotally of a number of people who've been harassed, who've been threatened, and our folks shouldn't have to put up with that in the workplace. We're supposed to be creating a respectful workplace, and it's our responsibility to make sure that happens. I hope that tonight this permeates through our staff from top to bottom and shows them the length to which this council and senior management are going to protect their right to work in a harassment-free workplace. That includes harassment from any of us, from any other employees, and from those with whom they interact on a daily basis, whether it be constituents, whether it be volunteers, whatever it may be. It's our responsibility to look after them, but it's the responsibility of our employees to bring these things to the notice of their supervisor and let it right up the food chain to the HR department, where these things can be investigated and then acted upon. So staff, you don't have to put up with this stuff. You've seen a clear demonstration tonight from this council of our commitment. And I hope to God at the end of the night, this is a unanimous vote to demonstrate to our staff that we're all behind them.
Thank you, Councilor McCreary. Councilor Vanderstilt, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. You know, working on this resolution is truly an honor for me as a survivor of some of the worst kind of abuse that you can imagine, and having to receive the help and grace to overcome those abuses and the effects of those abuses. I can spot people who are being treated poorly from across the room. They sense it, they know it, they talk to me. And I value the confidentiality of the relationships that I have with some members of our staff. And I can tell you that they are afraid to come forward to tell their stories about how they're being treated for fear of retribution, reprisal, and repetition. So rather than speak to the resolution in the beginning of my address here, I want to speak to staff. I know those provisions have already been made for you to be able to anonymously report what's been happening to you. I understand that those mechanisms exist and you're reticent to use them. The only way council will be able to measure how bad this abuse is and how frequently it happens is if we get the information. So here's my personal appeal to you, especially those of you who have told your stories to me and others. This is an opportunity for us to start to change the culture of this corporation. You have to ask yourself this question: since when did abuse and all of the words mentioned in this resolution, since when did that become allowable and normal? Since when did it happen that we watch firsthand, we watch people get abused on camera, get put down, berated, belittled, intimidated? None of our staff ever do that to any of our constituents, but they are in receipt of that kind of treatment on a regular basis. Now what you do is you add in isolation. You send your staff home and they work from home outside of their supportive social environment at work. Now they're at home and they're getting treated so poorly, so often, that it starts to affect their mental health. Underneath what we're calling a pandemic and all of the horrible things that happen as a result of that, in a situation of employment in their own homes, It is extremely difficult to deal with that kind of a constant bombardment of dealing with things that are within your control. You can provide service to people. All of our, what was it, 1,300 staff are all trained professionals who have the capacity to serve the public in very many different ways. What they should be supported with is not to be treated poorly. Provide a service, absolutely, but to never be treated poorly. So this is an exercise. It's a beginning of a longer exercise that will serve and can serve if we are willing to change the culture here in Brantford. What I want to see happen is I want to see the clear, the decisive results of this query, of this question to our staff. And I want to see some actionable items about how we give them their power back. I look forward to a healthy debate, and under the circumstances, based on what I've heard so far in terms of complaints that may not have yet been registered with the supervisors and whatnot have you, this is a rush. So if somebody needs to ask why the rush, I can give many examples.
All right, Councilor Van der Stel, thank you, perfect. Mayor Davis, please.
You know, I just love complimenting councillors when they do great stuff. And it's not hard to compliment Councillor Van der Stel on this. And, you know, I talked previously this evening about what Councillor Wall brought forward and how it really speaks to the strongest parts of what makes Councillor Wall such a good councillor. And Councillor Van der Stel, got to commend you. I mean, this speaks to the core of what you're about, which is a real sense of fair play. And you see this, and given your own personal background, you find it abhorrent. On top of all needing to protect employees and the workplace. So I don't want to add to that other than to say this, you know, part of this is creating expectations. This is, you can say it's culture, but, you know, many people, I've seen it firsthand. I can hear it in my office in terms of my staff. There's almost an attitude of, well, you're the public servant and you got to take whatever I'm going to dish out to you, and becomes really nasty. And that same person, because I spent 38 years in the courtroom, they would never think of doing that in a courtroom because they know as soon as I walk in the door, yeah, there's rules here and there's a custom of what's acceptable and what's not acceptable. Or they go into a bank. They know the same thing, that if they carried on the way they do with some of our staff, they'd find if they're in a private business, they won't be there very long. And so I think it's important then that staff will have an objective standard that they can refer to and refer people to if they become difficult. And they have all kinds of training on how to deal with difficult people. And there's a particular knack to doing that, but sometimes it just crosses the line totally. But they'll have that code of conduct. They can bring it to people's attention, say, you know, please, this is contrary to code of conduct. So it's creating that expectation, a set of rules that works in so many other situations. Right now, there really isn't any clear rules. It's like the Wild West. I can do whatever I want. That's the attitude of some people. And I agree that Councillor Van der Stel, Councillor Van Tilburg, I'm having a problem with these, but it's after 10:30, Councillor Dusky. That's my excuse. And Councillor Carpenter, I mean, they raised some legitimate questions about how far you can go with this and being mindful of certain rights that people have. So, but that doesn't mean you shouldn't try to strike the right balance. And some organizations have done it, and I'm sure we can do it and do it in a fair and balanced manner that will give people the right to express themselves in however way they want, so long as they're not being abusive or harassing, and give our employees the protection that they deserve and that they're legally entitled to in a workplace. You know, so it's just us fulfilling our responsibilities as a progressive employer, mindful of the concern and well-being of our employees, but also knowing that the public, we have to serve them as best we can and be adaptable to people are different. They have different ways of expressing themselves, but it isn't too hard in some of these situations to know when it's just straight abuse and harassment. So anyways, I look forward to seeing this code, and I'm sure there'll be some great debate about some of the particulars in it, but certainly it's well worth doing.
Thank you. Councilor Van Tilburg.
Thank you, Chair Antosky. I've been decidedly absent from social media. That was on purpose. I was waiting for a hill to die on, and this is one that I'm going to fight to the bitter end. If it's one of the last things I do on this council, it will be to ensure that our people are looked after just as well as our people are looked after in the private sector. And if I did not draw a parallel between how my people are treated in the private sector and how people are treated in the public sector, and do everything I can to facilitate that change, that culture change, I would be remiss. I would be grossly remiss. So what you will see is a bit of a difference in how I approach problem solving on the social media forefront. And I look forward to your support, your unanimous support for this. And more importantly, if you have the opportunity, members of council, to encourage those who have shared their experiences with you in the past to make sure that they tell their stories. It's only in them telling their stories and having the courage can you make the changes that necessarily deal with the kind of support that they need. So I thank you for the respect tonight, and I thank you for your efforts in the future. I think when we change the culture, we change it for everybody, not just ourselves in this room. We change it for everybody, and that is crucial to bringing Brantford into a healthier zone. Thank you.
Thank you. And I would like to make a couple of comments on this. I'm happy to see this come forward. I've been concerned about the culture. And I know that although this resolution is not specific to it, we've talked about it tonight, that this also implies, internal customers. And none of us are immune to the effects of COVID. We're all feeling it. But we need to remember also, I think we have to remind ourselves how we treat each other, how we treat staff, how staff treats staff. So we've got a lot of internal customers that we really need to be concerned about. Respect is not a difficult concept. We're here to disagree. We should disagree on things as a council, but we should do so constructively and respectfully, and we should do that with the public as well. So it's a full circle. This goes, all ways. It's not one way. So I'll be looking forward to seeing how this comes forward. And with that, we'll call the vote.
Councillor Martin, would you like to give a verbal?
Affirmative.
Thank you. Item 8.3, Customer Code of Conduct, is approved unanimously on a recorded vote. Those in favor, Mayor Davis, Councillors Vanderstelt, Celeste, Martin, Antosky, Wall, Van Tilburg, Carpenter, McCreary, Utley, and Weaver.
All right, and we have two notices of motion this evening. Councillor Martin, would you like to read the title of your notice, please?
Thank you. Wastewater, high water bill, 300 King George Road, Unit H7, Shoeless Joe's.
Thank you. And Mayor Davis, would you take the chair for a moment so I can move my notice of motion?
Be happy to.
Thank
I
you.
understand, Councillor Antosky, you've got a notice of motion.
Thank you. I do, Mayor. Municipal Asset Management Program. And with that, just under the wire, folks, thanks for everyone's cooperation. Good night, and we are adjourned.
Great job, Cheryl.